The Mario Kart series is one of the most iconic of all time. One of the few series that is universal. We've all played Mario Kart no matter which episode it was, and we've all understood, controller in hand, that these games are special, that they have a different aura from others, that they make us feel a whole range of emotions in just a few seconds. Mario Kart games are very exotic and different from what we can find elsewhere, and yet it's one of the few series to have successfully crossed the ages without ever disguising itself, and to have achieved success with each episode. Today, in celebration of the series recently celebrating its 30th anniversary, we look back on each installment of the main series, tracing their development, the context of the time, with an analysis of each game and how they've managed to evolve and adapt to their era each time, becoming one of the most beloved game series. Buckle up, because today we are going through the history of a legendary series. Here's the story of Mario Kart. It's 1990. Nintendo just released the Super Famicom in Japan and surprised the gaming world with its F-Zero, a technically impressive game that utilizes the Super Nintendo's Mode 7 for a 3D perspective, allowing for an impressive feeling of speed rarely seen before on a console at that time. Video games just moved on from the 8-bit era, and seeing this at that time was monumental, but not for Miyamoto. F-Zero is a good game in his eyes, but he finds it's incomplete. Something is missing: a multiplayer mode. It would be so incredible to have a multiplayer mode while still using the Mode 7 and the 3D perspectives of the console. With that in mind, Miyamoto assembles an 8-people development team to make a multiplayer racing game that uses the Mode 7. Nowadays, it might seem ridiculous, but back then, 8 people was not bad at all, especially since they managed to enlist Hajime Yajima, the excellent developer behind the impressive Pilot Wings, and Masato Kimura, the excellent developer behind the impressive F-Zero. The Dream Team is ready, but they hit a wall with this 2-player mode. It's much more difficult than they imagined. They've tried everything, and the console doesn't seem to support such a thing. But then, Hideki Kano, the project director and technical lead, has an idea. Instead of trying to shoehorn a 2-player mode into a game similar to F-Zero, why don't the developers start from scratch and make that their sole goal? Just 2 cars, 2 players, with Mode 7 on the same map. And they succeed. They manage to create a prototype with 2 different views and a restricted area to drive in. But to achieve this, they had to make concessions. In F-Zero, the races are really long. Nintendo measured this in different screens strung together, and they could create races spanning 100 different screens, providing a deep and immersive sense of speed with long straightaways. But with 2 different views to manage for the console, it's much more complex. They need to calculate position, speed, and perform transitions and rotations for both players, so they end up with only 16 screens. There's no room for long straightaways and gripping sensations of speed. Here they have to design simpler circuits and think about how to make them interesting despite their small size. The development team sees this as a failure. They feel they haven't managed to create that famous 2-player mode with interesting races because of these limitations. But what's great about Nintendo is that, as in many projects, it's precisely these technical limitations that force the development team to invent something new and think differently. They still know they have something interesting on their hands, a technology that just needs to mature. To make the circuits interesting despite these limitations, they are designed to have many more turns, and since they are smaller and more concentrated than those in F-Zero, With more turns and players go slower, it doesn't really make sense to use spacecraft for the drivers. They'll then try several types of vehicles before having the idea to use karts. Karts are smaller and much more suited to these twisty, short circuits. They're perfectly consistent with the course's design, in addition to make it natural to go slower than in other racing games. And while they are playing the prototype, they realize a problem. The characters they used aren't great because they're difficult to differentiate. It's hard to tell who you just passed and who is still ahead of you. That's when they have the idea to take sprites from other Mario games and try the prototype with these new characters. Immediately, the game becomes much more enjoyable and much clearer, adding a quirky aspect to it. And when they mention this to Miyamoto, he replies that's an interesting idea because it sparks curiosity and opens up many possibilities. He then appoints Tadashi Sugiyama as co-director of the project, someone who has worked on Super Mario Bros. 2, Super Mario Bros. 3, and knows the Mario universe well, to accompany this now Mario racing game. After deciding of that, it's time to tackle the most difficult part, the gameplay system. For this, they spend a lot of time renting a go-karting track, doing lots of laps to understand all the mechanics. They want to create a realistic driving system. So, Masato Kimura spends a lot of time studying the physics of speed, friction, inertia, etc. But after some tests, he realizes that it's boring, so he revisits the gameplay system and makes it smoother, simpler, and more fun. With the development team, they decide to use the circuits to introduce difficulty, not the vehicle driving itself. And that's a brilliant idea. The kart is fun to control. It responds easily to the player's commands, and although in real karting, karts are difficult to control and it's easy to spin out, that's not what's enjoyable in a video game. They make this decision even though it adds complexity to the track's design, since they're already limited technically, but it's the best choice to make the game enjoyable. However, they still decide to keep some depth to the driving system to maintain some level of depth in the game, encouraging players to progress as they play. The mechanic that perfectly embodies this mindset is the drifting mechanic. Drifts or power slides, as indicated in the manual, allow to take tight corners without slowing down. But they're difficult to master, and players will still need to understand when they're useful to use or not. And throughout the game's development, they keep testing prototypes and having fun with them. And there's one mechanic that amuses them more than anything: the traps. As they recall, at the time when the drivers were still suited men, they could throw gasoline cans. The gasoline would spread on the ground and make players slip. It fit well with the original characters, and when the characters were changed to Mario and his gang, they replaced the gasoline cans with Donkey Kong's banana peels. And still in this process of creating and trying out the game each time, they take so much pleasure in trapping each other that they feel the urge to add more items. They add plenty of items that you can pick up on the track, and that will change the course of the race. The development team is delighted and very proud. They feel that they've succeeded in making a great and very fun game. The items allow less experienced players to catch up with others by having stronger items, a very original and enjoyable balance. In the middle of the year 1992, and after just 1 year of development, Super Mario Kart is ready to transform the world of video games by inventing an entirely new genre of game. And its release is triumphant. It receives excellent ratings everywhere and is often referred to as one of the best games on the SNES, and above all, it sold surprisingly well, becoming one of the best-selling games on the console. And it's well-deserved because Super Mario Kart is an extraordinary game. Right from the intro, the game sets a fun, light, and amusing atmosphere. Between the upbeat and catchy music, the characters pulling playful pranks, and the bouncing animations on the screen, we already get a taste of what's to come, a fun, carefree game. And as you start, you quickly discover that the game is much more than just a racing game. Between the time trial mode, the match race mode, the battle mode, and the Grand Prix mode, there is much more than simple races here. The game offers plenty of different modes, but most importantly, complementary modes. After selecting your mode, you encounter the characters available in the game. And here's the first brilliant idea: Each character has its own specifics: maximum speed, acceleration, weight, and even maneuverability. And that's fantastic because it adds dynamic difficulty and allows for different driving styles, making the characters super interesting. Mario and Luigi have good stats all around without being exceptional in any area, allowing beginners who start the game and don't know the other characters to have a balanced gaming experience. And this is something that will be reused in all the series spin-offs. Mario is always a standard character with balanced stats every time. Peach and Yoshi have excellent acceleration but a relatively low maximum speed, making them ideal characters for beginners who make mistakes since the acceleration allows them to restart faster. But their low maximum speed makes it very difficult for them to front run, to stay in first place. Bowser and Donkey Kong Jr., on the other hand, are heavy characters with poor acceleration, so they restart slowly but have very good maximum speed, making them ideal for experienced players because every mistake will be severely punished. However, in return, if the player doesn't make mistakes, their maximum speed allows them to go faster than the others. It's also worth noting that the weight of the characters is important, because heavy characters can push lighter characters aside, causing them to lose time, and since the tracks are very narrow, it's common for players to bump into each other. And the choice of characters was quite surprising at the time. Nobody expected to see Koopa, who is just one of the many enemies in the Mario games. But the developers needed a fast character and thought it would be a good idea to surprise people. Even more surprising was the choice to use Donkey Kong Jr. rather than Donkey Kong himself. This was because Donkey Kong Jr. wears a white t-shirt, making him easier to animate and recognize from behind in the game than Donkey Kong. And they went very far in character customization. In addition to their stat differences, each character's engine makes a different noise based on the character. They each have their own victory music when they finish a race in a good position. And when the CPU controls them, they each have their own signature item that the computer will use to catch up with us. A star for the Mario Brothers, a banana peel for Donkey Kong Jr., fireballs for Bowser, etc. Some characters even have their own personalized taunts when they pass another driver, like Yoshi, Bowser, or Donkey Kong Jr. You can really feel that the characters aren't just there to capitalize on their popularity. They're here to bring their universe into the racing game. In fact, they even introduced a rival mechanic that modifies the speed of other characters based on their affiliations with the character you've chosen. For example, if you pick Princess Peach, Bowser will receive a speed boost. If you pick Bowser, Mario will drive faster, and so on for all characters. What's challenging for the developers is that by putting the Mario characters in the game, they need to ensure that they can be seen from all angles during the races, which is very difficult since it's not a true 3D game with a dynamic camera. Then they came up with the idea of drawing multiple different sprites from various angles and dynamically changing them based on the camera's position. And with the characters, you already start to understand what makes Super Mario Kart exceptional for its time. This game is for everyone. It has the Mario spirit in it. Anyone can pick up the controller and have fun. And the game modes align with this notion. The main game mode is the Grand Prix mode, designed for solo play or for duos, where the 8 characters compete for top positions in races spiced up by items. A Grand Prix consists of 5 races here, and the top 4 receive points based on their placement, so 9, 6, 3, and 1 in order. And if the player finishes in the bottom 4, they lose a life and must retry the race. And if they lose all 3 lives, the Grand Prix is lost. The Grand Prix system is very clever. Grouping the races together creates dynamic difficulty and progressively leads the player to more challenging races while allowing them to grasp the gameplay. And when they fail a race by finishing in the last positions, making them retry may seem harsh, but it ensures that the player is at the right level before moving on to the next, which is more difficult. And there's even a progression in the difficulty of the Grand Prix, which are ranked by increasing difficulty, with the last one unlocking only after finishing first in the other Grand Prix races. But it doesn't stop there, because once you finish first in all the Grand Prix races, you unlock a new difficulty, the 150cc, which boosts the speed of the vehicles and thus gives players less time to react. It's another smart way to naturally lead players to a higher difficulty level that represents the real game. And here, the formula works just as well because you go through the same learning phases and Grand Prix races, but this time in 150cc, with the courses also designed to push the player to naturally level up. What's quite crazy in the end is how different the game is in 150cc. Every mistake is more punishing, so you adjust your playstyle to be more cautious at first and then gradually gain confidence. And if there are any courses that are too challenging, you can practice them in time trial mode. The time trial mode is the perfect opposite of the Grand Prix mode. Here you can play alone. You can select any course you want without items, without coins, and in 100cc. It records the best final time and the best lap. This mode lacks a bit of interest because there is no 150cc in time trial mode. And at the same time, this mode is aimed at the most seasoned players, those who probably already play in 150cc. Plus, since we're on SNES, there's no way to share or replay our records, making it a somewhat limited mode. On top of that, for this mode to save the ghosts, you must not touch any walls or edges, and on some courses like Vanilla Lake, it's almost impossible, quite a surprising choice as well. But obviously the most important and the heart of the game are the multiplayer modes available. And here again they complement each other. Firstly, the Grand Prix mode is playable with 2 players, which makes them much more enjoyable. But in addition to that, there's the Match Race mode, where you can choose the course you want to play, and it's played without CPUs, so it's pure one-on-one. However, to make the races more complex, bullet bills roam around the course and try to hit the players, forcing them to be more vigilant. This mode keeps track of each player's wins and losses and aims to be the ultimate test between friends. It's a fun mode for 2 players that really encourages competition. In addition to these 2 modes, there's also the Battle mode, which allows 2 players to fight in an arena. Each player starts with 3 balloons, and each time a player takes a hit, one of their balloons bursts. It's like a kart racing combat game, a truly brilliant idea that adds a lot of depth to the game. Here all the rules change. It's not about who drives the best, but who uses their items the best. And since you can see what items the other player has on their screen, you can spy on each other and react continuously. All these game modes are great and allow for a varied gaming experience. But what's even more amazing is that they had planned even more modes. In a leak from 2020, we could see that a coin mode was planned, where the player who collects the most coins wins, completely changing the way of driving since some coins are really off the track. But there was also a gate mode planned, with randomly appearing arches on the map, where the first one to pass through earns a point, and also a rapid-fire mode where players shoot at each other with coins. It's pretty crazy to see all that was planned for the multiplayer mode. It's impossible to know why these modes were removed, especially since they were so advanced in development. But one can imagine that the limited cartridge size forced the developers to make choices, and also probably that these modes were too gimmicky in their eyes. But all this work is admirable. They didn't just settle for making a racing game just for the sake of it. They went all out with their ideas by introducing new modes. But beyond the intro, the characters, and the game modes, what will truly push the game to excellence is the design of the courses. The courses are excellent. Initially very simple to grasp the gameplay of the game, but very quickly they become more technical, and above all, they showcase the depth of the gameplay. Firstly, there's the turbo start, obviously, but especially the drifting that players will need to master to take increasingly tight and delicate turns. And in each Grand Prix, there will be very different races that call for a new way of driving. Firstly, races on easy-to-handle roads, then races on dry wood, then even races in water, on bricks, on chocolate, on ice, etc. And each of these terrains will change the way we drive and gradually complicate the vehicle physics. And of course, to accompany all these terrains, the environments are rich and varied, making good use of the Mario universe, which is already well developed thanks to the Super Mario games where he goes through all these different worlds, enabling memorable races characterized by their environment and layout. And each of these environments has specific obstacles. For example, on the road you can find oil slicks that cause you to lose control of your vehicle. In Bowser's castles and Ghost Valleys, there are small ramps that make you jump, with the distance depending on your speed, allowing you to take shortcuts. There are pipes blocking the way, ice blocks that can be broken but slow you down, arrows that accelerate, and so on. The races are really rich in different elements that make them unique, and that's just for the fixed obstacles, because in addition to that, there are dynamic obstacles. Enemies from the Mario universe that hinder the player, such as Cheep Cheeps, Monty Moles, Piranha Plants, or Thwomps, for example. Moreover, the environments also bring various traps, such as lava or abysses that block your vehicle until Lakitu brings the players back onto the track, costing a significant amount of time. Water that slows down vehicles, mud that makes karts harder to control. It's pretty crazy how the circuits are designed to renew the gaming experience every time. Before continuing with the most iconic race in the series, the Rainbow Road, and its incredible music, a very narrow and challenging course, the ultimate test for players. But that's nothing compared to what makes each race special, the coins, which make you go a bit faster for each one collected below 10. Strategically placed on the circuits to force players to take different trajectories, and of course, the items. The signature of a Mario Kart game is to have simple yet deep gameplay that gives everyone a chance to come first. There is the technical aspect with drifting, turbo starts, coins, and shortcuts, some of which are very different to take, like the one in the Ghost Valley. There's the easy-to-grasp aspect with Lakitu coming to rescue us when we're stuck, indicating when we're going in the wrong direction, but the most interesting idea is offering items that restore balance among players. The first-place racers will get items that are more challenging to use effectively, like the banana peel, a trap to place on the track, the green shell, a straight-line missile, or the feather, which allows for high jumps to take fairly difficult shortcuts. But the lower is your place, the more powerful and easier to use items you'll get. First, the red shells, which are homing green shells that you just have to press a button to use. Mushrooms for temporary speed boosts, the boo, which steals an item and helps avoid traps, and above all, the star, which makes you go faster and makes you invincible, providing a great sense of power, along with the lightning bolt, the most powerful item that slows everyone down for a while. And by combining all of that, every obstacle, every different environment, every enemy, every other racer, the placement of coins, and all those items, each race is completely different. You could choose the same circuit 10 times and something different would happen each time, giving the game immense depth and a constant feel of freshness. You can play Mario Kart for hours without ever getting bored or feeling like you're doing the same thing. And here it's even more important because the circuits are smaller due to the technical limitations. They require 5 laps to complete and have been carefully designed to have plenty of different paths, making them deeper and enjoyable to replay. And the musical work is just as exceptional, being as varied as the environments, with references to the Mario universe omnipresent and featuring high-quality sound design packed with great ideas. For example, the music for the star power-up enhances the feeling of power when activated, and the tempo doubles during the final lap, adding a sense of stress and making the end of the race even more intense. It's quite incredible, like many of Nintendo's historic series. From the very first installment, Nintendo managed to create an exceptional game. Intelligently designed, highly original, and incredibly fun. Starting from a simple challenge to create a 2-player racing game, and thus a technical advancement, the development team turned the technical limitations of the console into a strength by creating a universal game where everyone can enjoy playing with each other, regardless of their skill level, and easily pick up the game at a time when racing games were extremely technical. And it will become the signature of Mario spin-offs. Each game has simple gameplay and easy pickup coupled with great depth thanks to mechanics that are difficult to master. The epitome of easy to use, hard to master. From its release, the game is a hit, appealing to everyone, and critics unanimously praise the incredible technical work, but also, and above all, the game's vision, which, thanks to its various levels of depth, allows everyone to have a good time. The development team, composed of only 8 people, and in just a short year managed to create an exceptional game and an extremely solid foundation that marks the beginning of a legendary saga. And starting from the next installment, Nintendo will transform the formula and push it even further. In Super Mario Kart, all characters have different victory animations that involve, like in Formula 1, a champagne bottle. Mario plays with it, Donkey Kong Jr. shakes it vigorously, and Peach tosses it in the air. But in Japan, these animations are different because Bowser and Peach drink the champagne bottle, and Peach even appears to be tipsy after drinking, a playful animation to reward the player for finishing first. Unfortunately, as you might expect, Nintendo of America requested to change these animations, deeming them inappropriate for a young audience, so the rest of the world didn't get to see them. triumphant release of Super Mario Kart and its exceptional success, Nintendo starts considering making a new Mario Kart game for its next console, initially named the Ultra 64, which would later become the Nintendo 64. They kick off the development of this new installment, but its development quickly becomes hard, riddled with obstacles. The first problem is that the Nintendo 64 is a very complex console for developers, difficult to grasp and requiring a lot of work. It is powerful for its time, but only if you know how to use it, otherwise it ends up with fog everywhere or lags, which is unthinkable for a racing game. Another issue is that a huge part of Nintendo's staff is busy with other developments, notably Super Mario 64 and Pilot Wing 64. Even though it was originally planned for this new Mario Kart to launch with the console, its development is very fragmented in parallel with the development of the other two games. Moreover, the development of what would become Ocarina of Time also begins, and with Super Mario 64 being the top priority, the new Mario Kart is put on hold for a while. And after Nintendo publicly announces the start of its development, it completely disappears from the radar. Until Shoshinkai 1995, an annual event organized by Nintendo in Japan, where Nintendo showcased a stunning demo of the game, taking everyone by surprise as it wasn't necessarily expected. And the demo is magnificent. It's a huge technical feat. The game is called Super Mario Kart R for rendered, which refers to the rendering process, a process that involves creating an image from a 3D model or sprite. Essentially, what this means is that the races and environments are all in 3D and rendered in real time. A massive breakthrough at that time, as this is barely the beginning of 3D gaming. Despite a very complex development, Miyamoto announces that the game is 90% ready, but they couldn't provide a playable demo because it requires a lot of organization for multiplayer games. The demo of the game is beautiful and impressive, with 4 players simultaneously racing in real-time 3D environments, yet it will go unnoticed. Super Mario 64 is also present at the event, and it's playable as well, stealing all the attention. At that time, the gaming world stops turning, and everyone is eagerly anticipating Super Mario 64, which promises to be revolutionary. It's featured in all the magazines with several page features, and some are already talking about it as the best game in the world, even though it's just a demo. The Nintendo 64 is also highlighted thanks to its controller with a joystick and a push button behind it, the Z button. The console's revelation takes center stage, with Super Mario 64 stealing all the spotlight. So Super Mario Kart R gets somewhat overlooked, but it's not a big deal because the game is coming in just a few weeks, scheduled for the Japanese release of the console. And the demo is an opportunity to observe that the game, like Super Mario Kart, uses billboarding for the characters. Billboarding is the technique of displaying a sprite, which is a 2D image, in a 3D environment by placing it in perpendicular to the camera so that it faces the player, creating the illusion of being in 3D. It's a commonly used technique from the early days of 3D, which helps to limit the number of 3D models to be displayed. For example, this is the case with the trees in Luigi's Circuit and other graphical elements. It's thanks to these kinds of tricks that Nintendo manages to create this 4-player simultaneous 3D racing game. They're actually going to use a similar technique for displaying the characters by drawing sprites that show them from all angles and change based on the camera's position, once again providing that illusion of 3D to the player. Some criticize this choice because they could have used true 3D for the characters, but since you mostly see the characters from behind, it wouldn't necessarily have been useful to waste power on that. They preferred to focus on having the game run smoothly and make it playable with 4 players simultaneously. Thanks to all these advancements, the game is almost ready for the Japanese release of the console. However, while Nintendo was fine-tuning the final details, the computer that contains the 3D models of the characters suddenly shuts down and experiences a major technical failure, a hard disk crash. The data on the hard drive gets corrupted, rendering it unusable. Nowadays, this may seem absurd or even careless, but it was quite common at that time. Remember, it's 1995 we're talking about, and such incidents happened in many games. For example, it also occurred during the development of Pokémon, as Junichi Masuda has recounted. As a result, all the 3D models of the characters, which are used to generate sprites for billboarding, are lost. This necessitates redoing everything, and creating 3D models at that time was a time-consuming process. Consequently, the project faces delays, and the game's release is pushed back by several months, leaving the Nintendo 64's lineup with only 3 games. Finally, in December 1996, after a brilliant promotional campaign accompanied by anime-style advertisements, Mario Kart 64 releases on the Nintendo 64, giving players another gaming marvel to behold. It sparks immense excitement among players, remaining among the best-selling games for over a year. Everyone is clamoring for it, and it regularly goes out of stock. It launches in the United States a few months later, and upon release, it set sales records, becoming one of the biggest game launches, surpassing the record set by Super Mario 64 just weeks earlier. Nintendo initially aimed to sell 1 million copies in the United States within the first few months, but eventually 6 million copies are sold. The game is a phenomenon, even causing shortages of Nintendo 64 controllers. For 3 years, it remains in the top 10 best-selling games, despite the continuous flow of major releases on Sony's PlayStation. Many magazines award it titles like Game of the Year or Multiplayer Game of the Year 1997. What makes Mario Kart 64 so extraordinary that it effortlessly succeeds Super Mario Kart? Let's find out right away.
Welcome to Mario Kart!
What an intro! A splendid start, just as cheerful as Super Mario Kart, captivating and showcasing the console's impressive graphical capabilities right from the outset. The game starts and the first big novelty jumps out. Thanks to the Nintendo 64, you can now play Mario Kart with 4 players simultaneously on the same console. And that changes the whole vision of the game completely, because whereas Super Mario Kart was designed to be played with 2 players, and therefore both players push each other to improve, Mario Kart 64 is for everyone. Anyone should be able to pick up the controller and have fun without needing to learn complicated techniques or tracks. And we'll come back to that when we talk about the gameplay. What perfectly represents this pick-and-play vision is that everything is unlocked from the start of the game. Here, the 150cc is unlocked by default, as well as the Special Cup, allowing players who have spent a lot of time on Super Mario Kart to progress more quickly and therefore not necessarily need to go through the 100cc. It also allows anyone to invite their friends and play the races they want in the categories they want without needing to unlock anything. And on the character selection screen, which is surprisingly animated, you can see that the characters are even more personalized. In addition to new models, they now each have their own voice, plenty of taunts and lines of dialogue for every situation. Whether it's accelerating, using an item, drifting, or getting hit, the characters react every time, giving an even stronger sense of camaraderie among friends. Moreover, it echoes what we ultimately feel when playing. We want to taunt our friends when we pass them. We want to scream in despair when we get hit, and we want to explode with joy when we finish in a good position. It's worth noting that there have been quite a few changes to the characters. Donkey Kong Jr. has been replaced by Donkey Kong. Wario has taken Koopa's place after allegedly stealing his cart, according to the booklet, and Kamek, who was originally planned for the game and even playable in the Shoshinkai demo, has disappeared. Donkey Kong takes his place, which could be explained by the fact that Donkey Kong's 3D model was already done since it was provided by Rare, allowing them to release the game more quickly. After selecting a character, a race begins, and that's where the magic happens. The game is so easy to pick up. The kart is easier to control than in Super Mario Kart for one main reason. The joystick on the Nintendo 64 controller is perfect for racing games. Whereas in Super Mario Kart, the kart didn't turn naturally due to the limitations of Mode 7 and the D-pad. Here you can easily steer left and right thanks to the analog stick. It's incredibly satisfying to control, and it aligns with the direction of this installment. Simplify the game's controls while still maintaining enough depth for experienced players to enjoy. Once again, what perfectly represents this balance is the new turbo drifts introduced in this episode, which are quite difficult to master. You have to jump with the R button and hold it while steering right and left to execute mini turbos, indicated by the yellow then orange color. But to achieve a good time and to have a chance to win, it's not even necessary to perform them. Simply mastering your kart may suffice. This gives less experienced players a chance to win while rewarding experienced players for engaging in the game, since they will have an advantage over others. However, the turbo drifts also require taking risks, because you have less control over your vehicle while performing them. To equilibrate these complex gameplay mechanics, the items from Super Mario Kart make their return, with the exception of the feather, which disappears because the tracks are in 3D. It seemed less useful and eventually phased out. However, at the same time, new items are introduced. Multi-items make their debut, allowing players to receive 3 mushrooms in a single item box, or even 4 bananas at once. Additionally, players can obtain 3 green shells or even 3 red shells, potentially causing chaos on the track. In theory, at least, it's not uncommon for red shells to hit a wall and never reach their target. Players must be strategic in how they launch them. Furthermore, a new item makes its appearance, the fake item box, strategically placed to trap others since it's quite difficult to recognize during a race. But there are 2 significant innovations that have marked the series and are still present today. The golden mushroom, which allows players to use mushrooms infinitely for a limited period of time, and most notably, the blue shell, which appears and goes straight for the race leader without giving them any counterplay. Then why create an item like this? It's highly controversial because it allows weaker players to influence the race of the better players, but it makes total sense to have such an item in Mario Kart 64 because the races are much longer than in Super Mario Kart, where they were relatively short due to technical limitations. Consequently, even the last player in Super Mario Kart could potentially encounter the first player multiple times, since it wasn't uncommon to lap opponents. In Mario Kart 64, this is very rare, and it may feel like everyone is racing separately. For this reason, but also for the sake of balance, since it can slow down the leader, the creation of the blue shell makes perfect sense. Moreover, it's the rarest item in the game, so it's seldom seen, and it can hit everyone in its path, not only the first place. The other surprising novelty is the disappearance of the coins, probably because the races have become much larger, making them less meaningful here. But with the disappearance of coins, the introduction of the blue shell, golden mushroom, and carts that are much easier to handle, how does Mario Kart 64 manage to appeal to experienced players if everything has become easier for others? Well, beyond the highly gratifying drifts, the improved kart control allows experienced players more freedom to navigate certain turns and even discover shortcuts. Other gameplay elements have been added to diversify the gaming experience, such as drafting, which provides a boost when positioned behind another character. The recovery boost for quickly restarting after being saved by Lakitu, the starter boost for a superstar, and many other subtle techniques. But most importantly, where the game adds a lot of depth is once again in the level design. The tracks are incredible. While Super Mario Kart reused the same environments for multiple tracks, in Mario Kart 64, each of the 16 tracks has its own environment, obstacles, textures, and identity. They are stunning, and that's what really impressed everyone. That's where the development team really excelled, and each one of them is magnificent. Starting with simple tracks, of course, very open ones that allow players in last place to quickly catch up and even win the race, such as Luigi Raceway, where you can cut a good part of the track with a star or mushrooms, or more prominently, Koopa Beach, where there's a shortcut halfway through that cuts a large portion of the track and can change everything. But the further you progress in the game, the more you'll encounter complex technical courses where shortcuts are less common and driving is more difficult. Each of the courses is very well crafted and pushes its concept very far. Toad's Highway makes you drive in the middle of cars and trucks. Choco Mountain offers players a drive amidst a random avalanche of falling rocks. Calamari Desert with a train regularly passing by, forcing the player to adjust their trajectory. Bowser's Castle features different sections highlighting various aspects of gameplay, with thwomps chasing and trying to crush the drivers. Then a very narrow bridge over lava, stairs, a spiral ascent. It's a real adventure. The icy road amidst snowmen on slippery ground, DK jungle with coconuts persecuting players as soon as they leave the road. The work on each course is incredible, and they constantly renew the gameplay and the ways of driving, since driving on ice changes the vehicle's friction. The same goes for dirt, water, or sand. And Nintendo went above and beyond in this regard with an astonishing circuit, the Yoshi circuit, which is a maze with plenty of paths, the fastest ones being the hardest and never showing the current ranking, which implies that throughout the race, you don't know the positions of others and you don't know your position. It brings a very uncertain aspect throughout the race and completely changes from the others. The game plays by its own rules. It's extraordinary how they design their circuits. It's the same with DK Jungle and the coconuts I mentioned earlier. On the earlier circuits, you can cut large portions thanks to items, but here, the game prevents us from doing it so easily, and therefore encourages us to focus on driving. Can you imagine all the work it must represent? They even went as far as putting Peach's castle in the Royal Circuit from Super Mario 64, since it's used during the award ceremony, which is very well staged. And the big novelty of the circuits is also their verticality thanks to the 3D. There are jumps everywhere, and very impressive ones, like the one in the Royal Circuit or in DK Jungle, where we pass right over a boat. There are slopes that boost our speed, well-distributed descents and climbs. We move away from classic circuits to have layouts that resemble more roller coasters than racetracks, and that will serve to renew the gameplay all the time. And when you combine these original race ideas with these technical innovations, we get crazy, deep circuits that are very enjoyable to play and replay. And graphically, these circuits are very detailed and just as well crafted and well staged. In each race, you will dive into a new universe teeming with details, the different types of cars on Toad's Highway, the fire-spitting statues in Bowser's Castle, the immense Yoshi sculpture in the Snowland, the hot air balloon in Luigi's Circuit, the tide rising and falling on Koopa Beach, revealing crabs, the spooky pier with the appearances of Boo, the Rainbow Road with fireworks in the shape of characters. It's full of great graphical ideas that you'll have time to admire because the races in the game are very long. But more than its predecessor, Mario Kart 64 is above all a multiplayer game, and the graphical details had to be lightened to allow for 4-player simultaneous play. However, Nintendo has thought about those who play alone or in pairs by implementing a rubber band AI. What this means is that the faster you go, the faster the AI will go, and you'll have a hard time leaving it behind, offering you competition regardless of your level. That's for the Grand Prix mode, which also benefits from a new addition. The Extra mode appears when you finish first in all the Grand Prix races. In addition to getting a magnificent title screen, which incidentally becomes a sort of tradition in the series, you unlock the Extra mode. That makes you race the same circuits, but with the left and right reversed, which will later be called the Mirror mode, an intelligent mode, as it puts players on an equal footing because the more players know the tracks and have played them, the harder it will be for them to fight against their habits by reversing the left and right. But where the multiplayer mode shines even more, and a big draw of this Mario Kart 64 is the Battle mode. The Battle mode is exceptional because the same attention has been paid to the Battle mode maps, which are extremely creative and always bring about wild situations. There's the Block Fort with its levels of verticality, where you can quickly drop down on other players to attack them. The Double Deck map, which allows for easy hiding in corners and surprising opponents, and the Skyscraper map, which is more technical with holes scattered around and forces players to concentrate as much on battling as on their driving. This battle mode is fantastic and is a big asset of the game because it allows for easy fun with anyone, complementing the racing mode's gaming experience superbly. Mario Kart 64 is an exceptional game that has left its mark on an entire generation of gamers by taking the established foundation of Super Mario Kart and pushing it further, breaking through all the technical barriers that had hindered it. The tremendous work on each of the tracks and on the gameplay allowed the series to soar and establish itself as a unique series in the world of video games. Even though many developers have tried to copy it by releasing games that borrow its basics, very few of them have reached the level of what Nintendo has offered. Mario Kart 64 is the foundation of modern Mario Kart games. The blue shell, the golden mushroom, drafting, the design of original, crazy, and unique tracks, the turbo boosts, the mirror mode. It has brought so much to the series that we better understand why it sold so well and why it left such a lasting impression. And that's why the game impressed so much back then. That's why every magazine gave it a great score, and that's why it sold incredibly well, being on the top 5 selling games of this era, despite the Nintendo 64 selling way less than the Sony's PlayStation. In the Bowser's Castle course, there are thwomps blocking our path in the first section. But oddly, one of them is locked behind bars and never comes out during the race. In the late 2000s, a legend emerged on the internet about how to free this thwomp, supposedly named Marty. It was said that one needed to take Bowser and backtrack in the middle of the race, returning to the thwomp, which would then see the bars open and the thwomp set free. This information spread through videos, purportedly showing the process, but in reality, these videos were fakes. You could even spot mismatches on the minimap in the bottom right corner for a few frames. No one knows why this thwomp is locked up there, and on the Wii, when this course was recreated, Nintendo kept the thwomp behind bars, sparking a new myth on the internet. In June 2000, after weeks of rumors, Nintendo announced that a new installment in the Mario Kart series is planned for the Game Boy Advance, and both would be showcased at Nintendo Space World, the new name for the Shoshinkai. Given that some of the first games announced by Nintendo for the Game Boy Advance were remakes of NES and Super NES games, many thought that the game would be a remake of Super Mario Kart. However, the anticipation was high for a Mario Kart game on a handheld console, something unprecedented that sparked excitement and curiosity. What is even more surprising is that the development is entrusted to Intelligent Systems, a Nintendo partner game studio with a team of talented developers. They were responsible for creating games like Fire Emblem, Paper Mario, WarioWare, Advance Wars, making them a renowned game studio. However, similar to many of their other games, very little is known about the development of this Mario Kart. We have some pictures of the early beta showcasing the initial character designs with somewhat strange proportions. These betas were shown to journalists at some events, but aside from some graphical changes, the betas were very similar to what we later saw. However, the game was delayed. Despite being initially announced for release alongside the console, it was pushed back several months. It appeared in magazines later on, and even in the previews, journalists were shocked by the game's content. The planned 40 courses for up to 4 players, the integrated battle mode, and the game's graphics. Soon after, reviews started pouring in, and they were extremely positive, with incredible scores praising the enjoyable gameplay, clear and detailed graphics, and highly effective multiplayer modes. Mario Kart Super Circuit is released in the middle of 2001 with a tremendous responsibility, being the first Mario Kart game on a handheld console. It faces a significant challenge: how to transition a series built around multiplayer to a handheld console, where the experience must also cater to solo players? How to transform such a popular series without losing the core fanbase? Intelligent Systems had to perform a real balancing act. The task seemed daunting, especially with the phenomenon of Pokémon attracting a new audience to handheld gaming. Moreover, it arrived during a somewhat troubled period for Nintendo in the gaming industry, with the GameCube yet to be released, the PS2 dominating the market, and the importance of not missing the mark on the handheld console. It's safe to say that Intelligent Systems succeeded in this endeavor with flying colors. The game's introduction is very epic and immediately makes you want to start playing, much more rhythmical and frenetic than the previous ones. So how did Mario Kart Super Circuit manage to transform the multiplayer Mario Kart formula into a solo-oriented game on a portable console? Well, first of all, it retained multiplayer via the link cable, with 1 or more cartridges, and one of the selling points of the Game Boy Advance is the 4-player compatibility with the new link cable, and Mario Kart Super Circuit is one of the best to make use of that. But on handheld consoles, the solo mode is more important because people don't gather around to play on the console like they do with home consoles, and it's also more difficult to set up multiplayer on the go. The first thing you notice when starting solo is that no changes have been made to the characters. You find the same characters from Mario Kart 64, just as personalized surprisingly with the same sprites, the same taunts, the same voices, and that's really impressive already. We're on a Game Boy Advance, light years away from the power of a Nintendo 64, and the work on the characters is all the more impressive as we're at the beginning of the console's life. Mario Kart Super Circuit is a launch title for the machine. And at the character selection screen, you can see a big change from previous installments. Here, the character statistics are displayed. It might seem like a minor change, but no, it sets the tone for the whole game, a game where the racing aspect is much more important than previously. Because Mario Kart Super Circuit leans more towards being a racing game than a party game, and it differs quite a bit from Mario Kart 64. Here, the vehicles are harder to master, even though they're quite easy to pick up. The gameplay is a bit stiffer, but rewards taking more risks, mastering the vehicle, and punishes mistakes even more than Mario Kart 64. Added to that, the roads are narrower, so a bad turn of the wheel and you end up straight in the scenery, which quickly leads to lost time, especially since the GBA doesn't include a joystick like on the Nintendo 64, which makes movements a bit more complex. And as always, you can really see this difference in approach when you look at the mechanics of drifting. In Mario Kart Super Circuit, pulling off turbo drifts is very challenging. You need to drift for quite a while, and the turns have to be very clean and well executed to get a slight boost afterward. It's a complex mechanic, but very rewarding, and it encourages experienced players to invest themselves in the game. This choice is clever because with a game on a handheld console, you tend to come back to it more often, and you can afford to focus on long-term learning. On a home console, you should be able to start the game and have fun with your friends instantly, but on a portable console, you'll launch the game more times and have more time to level up. And that's also why mastering the turbo start is more difficult here, probably the most challenging in the whole series, which once again shows the direction taken by this installment. And since all the game mechanics are deep, everything is designed to encourage players to progress and go further. Mario Kart Super Circuit introduces ranks in the Grand Prix races, ranging from F to 3 starts, thus encouraging players to replay the Grand Prix races over and over until they achieve the 3-star ranking, giving players a reason to replay these races and naturally improve. The way the game assigns these ranks is surprisingly complex. The game analyzes many different variables. Firstly, the number of coins collected. Yes, because coins are back for the same reasons as in Super Mario Kart. The game also analyzes lap times, how often you press the brake button, which items you obtain and how you use them, how often Lakitu comes at your rescue, how many times you get hit by items, how often you hit obstacles like walls, whether you perform turbo starts or not, how you drift, and many other variables to ensure that you are playing the game well. It goes even further by taking into account the character you use. The more challenging characters you use, like Bowser or Wario, the more points you earn. It's quite impressive how far they went on this aspect to push players to take more risks to progress, and it once again demonstrates the depth intended by the developers. And in that regard, to once again differentiate from Mario Kart 64, where everything is unlocked by default. Here, the special cup is not selectable until you finish first on all the other cups. However, the game doesn't hide it. It's there in the list of Grand Prix races. You just can't select it yet, which encourages you to complete everything else first. With this gameplay, which I've described as being more complex and punishing, the game encourages the player to come back continuously because the progression curve can be really fast. At first, some races are brutal, but gradually the player gains confidence, masters the turns better, performs more drifts, and takes more risks. It's very rewarding. To struggle at the beginning and then get better day by day makes you want to come back again and again and do better. It's a really clever way to design a racing game for a portable console. As for the items, they are the same as those in Mario Kart 64, with the exception of the removal of the banana bunch and the fake item box, which would be too powerful in such narrow courses, and the golden mushroom, which doesn't really have much utility in such narrow races. The red shells now have much better AI, but there isn't much innovation on the item side, compared to the circuits, where we'll see quite a few new features. The courses were created with the mindset of rewarding the most dedicated players while also accommodating novice players. But how does this vision translate? Well, it translates into dozens of shortcuts, some easier to take than others, and above all, plenty of different paths, with easy and risk-free paths for beginner players. And gradually, you'll find others that are more challenging to take, but offer a significant time save. This is one of the Mario Karts with the most shortcuts. They're everywhere, and some shortcuts are even traps that may save you time initially, but ultimately hinder your ability to take the next turn properly. It's up to you to exercise discernment and understand which shortcuts are good and which are not. There's even a gradation in the shortcuts, with several shortcuts at the same location varying in difficulty and concealment. At first, you'll take the visible shortcuts, but gradually, you'll push yourself to discover increasingly challenging shortcuts, which is extremely rewarding and adds a lot of variety to the races. Surprisingly, you'll understand this concept from the very first race of the game, Peach Circuit. The first turn is perfect for learning mini turbos easily, and then there's a turn that can be cut by jumping over it at the right moment without losing any time. And this shortcut is right in front of you, encouraging you to try it out, planting in the player's mind that they shouldn't always stick to the circuit's layout. It's really surprising, honestly. You wouldn't expect that in a Mario Kart game from that era, but the way the circuits are designed really encourages player creativity. There are plenty of shortcuts that you discover naturally while playing, like the ones in Ribbon Road or Lakeside Park that are crazy but easy and saves a lot of time. The game pushes you to try shortcuts everywhere. Take, for example, Riverside Park. There are intentionally holes in the wall for you to pass through, but there's still deep water, so you have to use a mushroom and jump at the right moment to get through. There's even another shortcut on the other path with a shallow water line amidst the abyss. I find it so ingenious how they design the circuits where you can keep coming back and discovering new paths after racing them many times. And the place where it's most evident is on Rainbow Road. Rainbow Road is fantastic because it's filled with edges that makes you jump. So by gaining speed, like with mushrooms for example, you can cut through large portions of the course. But it's challenging to pull off. It perfectly embodies the spirit of this game. Plus it gives an incredible sense of freedom. You're always imagining how far you can push it all, and it's a brilliant choice that adds limitless depth to the game. What's even better is that after successfully implementing all of this in the time trials, you can exchange your times and time trial ghosts with your friends. So you can compare and compete remotely, which further enhances the replayability. And once again, the circuits showcase a variety of different environments and remain as creative as ever. There are races on cheese, others in a heavenly garden among the clouds, in the middle of the desert, and even circuits with visual effects like Luigi's Circuit in the rain, which creates puddles that make our vehicles skid. Snowland features snowflakes and slippery ground. Lakeside Park is next to an erupting volcano. Bowser's Castle has Kamek flying around. Rainbow Road has stars falling on the track, and all of this is accompanied by stunning backgrounds packed with details and events like lighting in the background of Bowser's Castle. It's pretty remarkable because it's on a Game Boy Advance, not a home console. The music is fantastic and complements all these environments with a faster tempo than Mario Kart 64's. Once again, subconsciously urging the player to go as fast as possible to match the beat. They are also of excellent quality with catchy melodies. Listen to this. And after playing a lot, after coming first in all the races and then replaying all the Grand Prix, of which there are 5 here, and collecting 100 coins, you unlock 20 new tracks, the 20 tracks from Super Mario Kart remastered in the game. It's pretty crazy that so much content could fit into the cartridge. Mario Kart Super Circuit contains 40 different circuits. It's mind-blowing. The content seems endless, and that's exactly what you would expect from a game on a handheld console. You can come back to it again and again without getting bored. And to further encourage players to play and replay them, the AI is really strong, and the rival mechanic from Super Mario Kart makes its return. And after completing all the tracks, you unlock a new title screen. And when you finish all the cups with 3 stars, you get another new title screen under the stars of Rainbow Road, a way to show your friends that you've achieved an extraordinary challenge because it's extremely hard to finish everything with 3 stars. But then with all of this, Mario Kart isn't really Mario Kart anymore. If the emphasis is so much on the driving, it becomes more of a true racing game, right? Well, not exactly. The team at Intelligent Systems had the good idea to balance this out by putting a lot more items in the races than in previous games, especially in the early races where you have items all the time, which tends to overload the action in a good way. It keeps chaining all the time at a frenetic pace, without ever letting the rhythm drop. Fun and complex at the same time, a delicate balance, but one that really works. And the paradox of this game is that it sold extremely well at the time, even exceeding Nintendo's forecast, and received exceptional critical acclaim. But it's completely overlooked today. Many Mario Kart fans don't really know about it, and they're not even aware that this game exists. Even back then, there wasn't much advertising, and Nintendo let it live quietly on its own. And you can understand why. Mario Kart Super Circuit is the swan song of the old vision of Mario Kart, the one that favored driving and had less of that carnival spirit that we would see later on. But it's a shame that it's forgotten like this because it's truly excellent in its approach and very well constructed. It succeeded brilliantly in its ambitious goal of having a Mario Kart on a handheld console without diluting the essence of the series. Intelligent Systems understood everything and demonstrated great mastery and intelligence by emphasizing driving to better suit a handheld console, while still making items important and keeping the multiplayer modes, which here serve to push players to excel, play with friends, and when you lose, you train on your own and come back stronger. Plus, you can even exchange time trial ghosts right from the main menu for that. And that's why I love this game so much. When I was younger, its vision totally resonated with me. I first struggled with the game, then I came back to it, gradually improved until I achieved good ranks everywhere, and I was blown away when I discovered the 20 remastered Super NES courses, and when I found so many crazy shortcuts everywhere. With my friends, we trained on our own, and every time we came back, we had all improved, pushing each other to excel for a long time. Maybe someone who didn't have friends to play it with would have a different perspective on the game. In any case, even though this vision will disappear in the following games, Mario Kart Super Circuit has contributed to the evolution of the series. Much of what it brought is still visible in the current games, seeing stats at the character selection screen, which again emphasizes the importance of driving, having ranks for each Grand Prix, or even remastering the old courses. Mario Kart Super Circuit has been extremely important in the history of the franchise and has left a lasting impression on players who got their hands on it at the time. And it brought the biggest innovation in the series' history, the horn. Interestingly, although this game wasn't developed by Nintendo, it draws a lot of inspiration from the company's games. For example, the music in the Bowser's Castle courses is heavily inspired by Bowser's theme in Super Mario 64. The references get even more specific, such as the Shy Guy Beach course, which comes from a level in the lesser-known Yoshi's Story game, where you can spot Shy Guys on boats in the sea. And it goes even further, for instance, in the Rainbow Road track. There's a fortress in the background from Paper Mario, another game developed by Intelligent Systems. There are plenty of other references scattered throughout the game, so discreetly placed that few players have noticed them. In the early 2000s, the PlayStation 2 is crushing the market, and Nintendo needs to react. At E3 2001, Nintendo announces a new Mario Kart for the GameCube and shows a 7-second video that didn't reveal much. Instead of reassuring everyone and proving that they are working on a new Mario Kart, the video had the opposite effect. People quickly noticed that it featured models from Smash Bros. Melee on the carts from Mario Kart 64, revealing that Nintendo had nothing substantial to show. This was because the game wasn't even in development at that time. Nintendo was busy with Mario Sunshine and Zelda Wind Waker. However, a few days after E3, Miyamoto assembled a unique development team. He chose to mix people who had already worked on the Mario Kart series with those who loved it, but more importantly, he added many people who neither played nor liked Mario Kart. He tasked them with creating a new Mario Kart game that would appeal to everyone on the team, thus aiming to create an episode that pleased everyone. And that's an extremely challenging task. Nintendo absolutely wants to create a game that's very easy to pick up, yet at the same time has depth. It's so difficult to try to combine the two that it's rare to find games that appeal to such a wide audience. At that time, Nintendo was trying to emphasize the connection between the GameCube and Game Boy Advance. So initially, they tried to come up with ideas that aligned with that direction. However, since the GameCube was selling poorly, they were pressed for time, and besides, they didn't really have any convincing ideas for a potential connection between the two consoles. Fortunately, the development team has quite a few new ideas for the series. For example, they want to add a rear-view mirror in the bottom right corner to see what's coming up behind the player at all times. However, this idea proves impossible to implement because it would require too much power from the console, which would have to handle a maximum of 8 viewpoints simultaneously, so they end up scrapping it. They also want to create a new special cup, the Reverse Cup, where the circuits will be designed to be played normally, but also raced in reverse, before it's ultimately abandoned for unknown reasons. In interviews, Miyamoto mentions the game and explains that he is surprised by the development team's ideas and that the game is going to be great. And then, nothing. For over a year, the game disappears from the radar with no information provided by Nintendo. And some journalists even speculate about a potential cancellation due to the poor sales of the GameCube. But in April 2003, Nintendo reveals the name of the game, Mario Kart Double Dash, and shares plenty of screenshots of the game, surprising everyone. The graphics look incredible, a huge improvement over Mario Kart 64, but most importantly, there are 2 characters on each kart and even special items, which piques everyone's curiosity. The game is finally showcased at E3 2003 with a playable demo that surprises all the journalists who got to try it. They find it beautiful, packed with new features and innovations, and extremely promising. The game is increasingly anticipated, and Nintendo regularly shares trailers and images of the game before it finally arrives in November 2003, accompanied by a rather strange promotional campaign. The early 2000s was a time when Nintendo sought to renew its communication, to appeal to a more mature audience, and as a result, they created quite a few rather bizarre ads. I'll let you be the judge. Mario Kart Double Dash is launched at the end of 2003 in both a standard version and a collector's edition, and everyone can finally get their hands on the most revolutionary Mario Kart in the series. Strangely, the initial feedback after the release isn't extraordinary. The game is received rather lukewarmly. While it receives decent scores, it falls short of the series' standards and the extraordinary reception that Mario Kart 64 had. So what did the journalists criticize about the game, and why didn't it charm players as much as its predecessors? Let's find out right away. What an ultra-frantic intro with cuts every 3 seconds. We're much more in a light and carnival-like atmosphere than in the previous games. And right from the title screen, you can notice the big innovation of the game, which is having 2 characters on the same kart. The character at the front of the kart handles the driving, while the character at the back handles throwing items, and you can switch characters by pressing the Z button. This is an important feature because now you can hold 2 items at once, 1 per character. Yes, in previous games you could also hold 2 items, but it was with specific items that you could hold behind you for protection, and usually the worst items of the game. Here you can get 2 great items, like a lightning bolt and a golden mushroom, for example. If you hit an item box but already have an item, it will be added to your reserve. And there are even double item boxes that give you 2 items at once, placed in the least optimal trajectories, which gives it a much more party game vibe than in previous games. Everyone has items all the time. There are item boxes right on the tracks, moving around like on Mushroom Bridge, and it's chaos all the time, much messier than in Mario Kart 64, especially since the races are shorter and more focused on turns and obstacles. In that regard, some items can now fall on the ground, like when a lightning bolt is used, which now remove the items of every player, causing them to drop on the ground. It can be very useful if you find stars and mushrooms on the ground, and it really emphasizes this aspect of absolute chaos and immediate fun. There can be turnarounds all the time. And still, in that direction of being more fun, the carts are much bigger, making them easier to hit with items like shells, for example, which tends to make the races even more chaotic. But they're also bigger because there are 2 characters per cart, which changes a few things. It adds some strategy on how to use items, especially since here you can't hold items behind to protect you. You have to throw them backward at just the right moment to avoid getting hit. And I mentioned the rear view mirror that Nintendo wanted to implement but couldn't due to performance issues. They replaced it with an alert at the bottom of the screen when an item is coming towards you, a smart alternative that lets you know when you're going to get hit and react accordingly. But what's the point of having 2 characters on one cart if it doesn't really change the gameplay that much? Well, it comes from the fact that Nintendo wanted to bring together experts and beginners in the game and thought it would be interesting for both to team up on the same cart with divided tasks. But the problem is, it doesn't really work. When you play together on the same cart, you feel like you're not contributing much and having less fun. The one driving might get a bit bored because without items, Mario Kart loses its charm. And then one using the items might get even more bored because using items happens very quickly, and the rest of the time they're passive. Although there are still some small strategies where the person at the back of the cart can slightly influence the trajectories and hit nearby players. And it might send a very bad message. If you're new to Mario Kart, you shouldn't be afraid to play alone and learn gradually rather than being pulled up by a more experienced player. And that's what earned the game some criticism from journalists. The idea of having 2 players on the same vehicle completely impressed everyone during the first screenshots, and everyone was curious to see how it would be implemented. However, many were disappointed with this aspect, arguing that it limited the action too much for players. In fact, Nintendo seems to have understood this as they abandoned this idea later on. So on the character selection screen, you have to choose a character combination, each with their own stats, and create your own team. There are 20 characters available, more than twice as many as before, with plenty of newcomers like Piranha Plant, Waluigi, Paratrooper, Baby Mario and Luigi, and even Toadette, making her very first appearance. Surprisingly, in addition to each having different stats, we also have access to different carts, each with their own stats. Yeah, it's a bit chaotic, with 190 possible character combinations, some of which are restricted to specific carts. Not every character can ride every cart. But what really makes them stand out is their animation. The characters are superbly animated, with a variety of animations depending on the situation. The character at the back often ends up dragging on the ground after taking a hit. They burn their butts after being hit by lightning, they juggle with shells, and so on. Nintendo really took advantage of this being the first Mario Kart with real 3D modeled characters to make them do all sorts of things, adding to the game's whimsical aspect. Plus, with all the quips, screams, and constant sound effects, it creates a cacophony effect when you're in the middle of other racers. And the characters are even more important than in other games because here they also have exclusive special items assigned to each of them. In addition to the return of shells, mushrooms, banana stars, lightning bolts, and the fake item box, each character group has its own bonus item. Mario and Luigi have fireballs, loads of projectiles that bounce around and can hit others. Yoshi and Birdo have rolling eggs to hit characters in front, which, when they hit, break and drop items. Baby Mario and Luigi have a chain chomp that is super strong and can knock everyone out without even driving. Toad and Toadette have access to the golden mushroom. Wario and Waluigi have a big bomb, and Bowser and his son have a giant shell. This idea sounds great on paper, but it's not very well implemented as the balancing is unfair. Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong have a poor giant banana peel as their exclusive item. Koopa and Paratrooper have triple shells, which is so lame compared to the Chomp Chomp or Golden Mushrooms that everyone ends up choosing the same characters, unfortunately. What Nintendo seems to have wanted to do is to give stronger items to beginner-friendly characters, those with high acceleration but low speed, so that players who choose them can catch up during races and reduce the gap between the best and the worst players. However, in practice, since you can choose a combination of characters, skilled players can select a character with access to these good items along with heavier characters for speed, thus having the best of both worlds. But the biggest issue with the game is that Mario Kart Double Dash doesn't make sense in what it's trying to achieve. Essentially, it's trying to appeal to both beginner and experienced players, so Nintendo made a lot of changes to cater to both. However, it's not possible to reconcile the two in this manner. To appeal to beginners and narrow the skill gap, the game has more items, doesn't allow for braking to avoid bananas or some obstacles which was possible in previous games, and removes the jumping mechanic, which was really useful to create shortcuts. Players are no longer required to finish in the top 4 to proceed to the next race, and many things have been simplified to make it easier for beginners to pick up the game. However, at the same time, they introduced extremely complex gameplay mechanics like the R-Tech, which allows for taking tight corners by quickly pressing the R button, sideways boost to release mini turbos in the opposite direction of the kart, but most importantly, the snaking mechanic, the ability to start a drift and alternate left-right rapidly to gain infinite mini turbos. This technique is incredibly powerful if you face someone who masters snaking. You'll never catch up regardless of your items. Snaking is also present in Mario Kart 64, but in Double Dash, it's much stronger because the mini turbos provide a greater boost and the karts are easier to handle. Additionally, in this game, the blue shell can be avoided with mushrooms, but also just with a well-timed mini turbo, and the same goes for red shells. This allows veterans of the game to widen the gap even further. Some people think that these mechanics weren't intended by Nintendo, but I doubt it, considering that snaking already existed in Mario Kart 64. Furthermore, in the level design of the courses, it really feels like these techniques are taken into account. For example, the spiral in Wario Stadium is perfect for the R-Tech, but very difficult without it. Or the extremely wide courses with equally wide turns are perfect for learning snaking. But because it has complex and deep mechanics, it appeals greatly to hardcore players. In fact, even today, it has a community that has never given up on the game and continues to set records. It's great to have such a deep game that continues to evolve years after its release. But it's difficult to consider that as a real quality, since Nintendo's goal of appealing to both casual and expert players wasn't achieved because of it, and it contradicts the party game aspect that it emphasized. Mario Kart Double Dash is extremely fun for experienced players and for casual players, but only if they play separately. But if all these techniques are possible, it's mainly because the gameplay itself is excellent. The karts respond to our commands effortlessly. They are so maneuverable that it's a real pleasure to control them, especially the drifts, which are very satisfying to execute with the analog triggers of the GameCube controller. But obviously, the most important thing in a Mario Kart game is the multiplayer. And as long as there isn't too big of a skill gap between players, the game is incredibly fun. With all the chaos happening all the time, Double Dash really captures that chaotic spirit in the best way. It's the craziest Mario Kart game in the entire series. Spending an afternoon on this game with your friends guarantees a lot of laughter. And you can even play with up to 16 players at the same time thanks to the GameCube LAN adapter, which is compatible with the game. It was quite madness for its time, even if there is no online, and this was one of the main criticisms made by game critics. And when it comes to having fun with friends, there is nothing better than the battle mode in Mario Kart Double Dash. There is the return of the balloon battle on crazy maps, a giant cake, a square arena with crossroads everywhere, an arena with pipes that teleport you in the opposite direction, and even an arena on the Nintendo GameCube itself. And in addition to the balloon battle, there is the Shine Thief mode, where the goal is to hold onto a shine until the timer runs out, or the Bomb Blast mode, where you toss bombs everywhere. The arenas are so well designed that it's a constant war zone with everyone crashing into each other all the time. It's incredibly fun and crazy with things happening all the time. It's one of the best battle modes in the entire series. And in this mode, playing as a team of 2 on one kart makes perfect sense because there's so much action and so many items to use that both players will be busy all the time. It works so well that it seems like it was designed specifically for that. But of course, the main mode remains the classic races, and here again, the tracks are very ingenious and highly original. First of all, there is a new introduction for each track that shows the obstacles and the layout of the circuit, a brilliant idea that will remain thereafter. And the preview is welcome given the madness of the circuits in this Mario Kart. Just the Luigi circuit, the very first track of the game, has the brilliant feature of crossing the first and last places. But that's just a taste of all these completely surreal circuits. There is the Waluigi Stadium, a motocross stadium that makes the kart tricky to handle, the DK Mountain, a gigantic downhill with lots of turns, the Yoshi circuit, which is literally a circuit shaped like a Yoshi, the Bowser's Castle, which looks like a real adventure with crazy stuff at every corner, and it ends with a mechanical Bowser spitting fireballs. There is the legendary Rainbow Road with stars falling on the track that can now be picked up, the Dino Jungle where you drive in the middle of dinosaurs, and even a race in the middle of a tilting cruise ship with moving tables, which perfectly represents the big novelty of these tracks. They're much more lively and dynamic, with elements moving around the track like cars, sandstorms in the desert, huge ice blocks, a chomp ready to eat everything in its path, and that's everywhere. It's incredible how creative they are and manage to find ever crazier ideas that they implement perfectly in the game while taking players through even more varied environments. It makes them driving into even more adventurous situations. And the most creative of them all is the Baby Park. Yes, it's just an oval where you have to do 7 laps, but this race quickly becomes completely crazy because items are flying everywhere. The leaders catch up with the lasts quickly, items fall on the ground, Bowser's giant shell flies in all directions. It's just a merry mess that perfectly captures the spirit of the game. But on top of that, where these races really shine is that they're filled with a lot of shortcuts, but with traps. Alternate paths are sometimes slower even though they seem like shortcuts. And these alternate paths, they're everywhere. And it's super well crafted because there are moments where the group of karts separates and everyone grabs items. And then suddenly, everyone finds themselves with items at the same place, leading to even crazier situations. And we'll have plenty of time to discover these shortcuts because there are lots of things to unlock in this Mario Kart. First, you have to finish the first 3 Grand Prix to unlock the Special Cup. But after finishing the Special Cup in 100cc, you unlock Toad and Toadette. Then after completing everything in 150cc, you unlock a marathon of the 4 Grand Prix, where you do all 16 races in a row, and by doing that, you unlock the Mirror Mode. Finishing the Mirror Mode eventually unlocks the Piranha Plant and Boo. There's quite a bit of content in the end, and it's quite challenging to finish it all, so few people are aware that the Piranha Plant and Boo are in the game. But it's not a great idea that you have to finish first in the races in 100cc to unlock the Special Cup, which means that even if you finish everything in 150cc, the Special Cup won't unlock. You have to do everything in 100cc, which is a bit silly for series veterans who could start directly in 150cc. There are even some fantastic new battle maps to unlock. It feels like it never ends, although it's regrettable that Nintendo didn't include more races. In Mario Kart Super Circuit, there are 40 races, and here only 16, even though they're obviously much bigger and more complex. Despite a few flaws that have been criticized, Mario Kart Double Dash is an excellent game that managed to give the series a new direction. A much more fun direction with instant enjoyment thanks to completely crazy tracks, gameplay that's much easier to pick up despite complex mechanics, and faster, more catchy music than previous games. Mario Kart Double Dash is just a huge load of fun, provided you have a few friends around who are roughly at the same level. You'll have to go through all sorts of emotions, and that's why it has left a huge impression on those who played it. Mario Kart Double Dash is truly unique among Mario Kart games. It's the one that dared to try crazy things and has a magical atmosphere surrounding it. It's going to be tough for Nintendo to make a new one, especially since the next one is planned for a handheld console. In addition to all these innovations, Mario Kart Double Dash is the first to introduce a coherent universe with tracks that reference each other. Mario Kart Super Circuit had timidly attempted this. For example, there is a Luigi airship seen on the Luigi Circuit and Sky Garden. However, Double Dash goes much further. For instance, on Peach Beach and Yoshi Circuit, You can glimpse a large boat in the background, which is actually the Daisy Cruiser, where you'll race later. On Yoshi Circuit, there's a Yoshi helicopter, also found in Baby Park. The same principle applies to the volcano on DK Mountain, visible from Dino Dino Jungle and Baby Park, or the Mushroom Bridge and Mushroom City, located adjacent to each other. It's taken even further when you race on Rainbow Road, which takes place directly above Mushroom City. Linking all these courses is brilliant in terms of world building. There was a similar approach in Super Mario Sunshine, where you could see distant areas from the first level. It's a great way to create a cohesive universe despite the diversity of environments, even if few players noticed it. And another curious fact is that, for some strange reason, Luigi's cap L is upside down on the cover. It's at the famous E3 2004 that Nintendo unveils the Nintendo DS, a revolutionary console with two screens, including a touchscreen, a microphone, backward compatibility with the Game Boy Advance, and online gaming. The reception by journalists is incredible, but Nintendo doesn't stop there and already starts showcasing games for this new Nintendo DS, such as Metroid Prime Hunters and Super Mario 64 DS. A 3D FPS Metroid, and a 3D platformer Mario playable on a handheld console, which was really impressive. In addition to these presentations, Nintendo announces 7 games for the console's launch, including the next Mario Kart installment, Mario Kart DS. And they already announced that the game will let players race online, making it the first true online game in Nintendo's history. Then the console is launched at the end of 2004, and no sight of Mario Kart DS, despite being an extremely anticipated game. Nintendo announces the game's delay without providing a new release date, but still shares 3 images of the game to keep fans waiting. And if the game is delayed, it's because Nintendo wants to utilize the console's power to its fullest. They aim to create a game with 3D environments running at 60 frames per second, which is no easy task on the Nintendo DS. Plus, adding the famous online play that Nintendo is exploring must be flawless upon release. The game disappears from the radar until E3 2005, where a trailer and about 10 screenshots are revealed, showing indeed that everything is in 3D. Inside the company, the developers try to leverage the console's new features. For example, they consider using the bottom screen to place items wherever on the track, rather than having to drop them behind, but they abandon the idea because it's too distracting in the middle of a race to have to touch the touchscreen, especially with everything happening during a Mario Kart race. And the other feature that will significantly delay the project is the game's online mode. It's 2004, and implementing online play isn't easy. Nintendo doesn't yet have the necessary architecture and very little experience in this area, which will delay the project for several more months. Additionally, balancing a game with such a wide audience, as seen with Double Dash, is always tricky and will also take quite some time. Finally, a release date is announced. Mario Kart DS will be available on November 25, 2005, alongside Nintendo's optional accessory for Wi-Fi connectivity. In some countries, a bundle with the console is even announced. Mario Kart DS is released in the United States at the end of 2005, and server traffic exploded, breaking all records for a video game in its first week of availability. The game was extremely well received by critics and players, who were not expecting such a comprehensive experience and already hailed it as the ultimate Mario Kart, finding almost no faults. In fact, it's one of the highest-rated Mario Kart games in the entire series, and one of the few that managed to win over everyone, casual and experienced gamers alike, journalists, and even the mainstream press. So how did it manage to captivate everyone, and why is it so extraordinary? What made it leave such a lasting impression on players to the point where it's still considered one of the best today? Let's find out.
Here we go!
Right from the intro, you can sense the direction of the game. Here, we're not in the epic intro of Mario Kart Super Circuit, nor the wacky and carnival-like intro of Mario Kart Double Dash, but somewhere in between. Although personally, I find it a bit too calm for a Mario Kart game intro. It's a bit too understated, much like the simplistic box art. As we start the game, the first thing it asks for is your name and to draw an emblem on the touchscreen. It's something that sits either at the front or back of the kart, but you never see it during races. And of course, people had fun drawing all sorts of weird stuff. It doesn't serve much purpose, but since the game was launched early in the DS's life cycle, it at least allowed for some use of the touchscreen. When starting off in single-player mode, you will notice there are more game modes than in previous games. And even in the character selection, there's a big novelty. The character models are indeed in 3D, with different animations that allow for good customization, especially considering it's on a handheld console. So yes, compared to Double Dash, it's a step down, but that's expected since we're not on a GameCube. If we're comparing it to a previous game, it's more apt to look at Super Circuit, and the difference is staggering, despite there being only a 4-year gap between the two games. Speaking of characters, there are 12 in total, which is respectable if not exceptional. The choice of some characters is very original, but most notably there's Rob the Robot, the accessory released with the NES. He's the first character with no direct link to the Mario series to be introduced in a Mario Kart game, and I think it's a neat Easter egg and a pleasant surprise without being silly fan service. Just a fun nod. Interestingly here, each character has one or more associated karts, but you can unlock all the karts for all the characters, unlike Double Dash where it was a bit messy since the karts depended on the selected character combination. There's a whopping total of 36 karts available here, even though a third of them are just each character's standard kart. The other 24 are fantastic. There's everything from Waluigi with his crane, Skelerex with his tank, Luigi with his vacuum, to a tractor, a shooting star, an egg, a kind of tricycle, a unicycle. It's incredibly diverse and original. It's all over the place in the best possible way, and seeing Waluigi squeeze his long legs into an egg is genuinely comedic. But all these vehicles don't just change the visual aspect. They all have detailed statistics. There are 6 different statistics: speed, acceleration, weight, and handling, which were already present, but 2 new ones make their appearance. The drift stat affects the ability to take tight corners while drifting, and the length of the mini turbos once the drift is released. There's also an item stat that influences the likelihood of obtaining powerful items, and the duration of some items like the star. What's clever is that the game intelligently balances players' skill levels through the karts. Karts with a high maximum speed have very low item stat, so skilled players who want to use these karts will have less chance of getting strong items, whereas beginners who tend to choose karts with more acceleration, easier to handle, will have a good item stat and more chance of catching up in races with strong items. And these items have undergone big changes. Gone are the character-exclusive items, which is actually good news because, as I explained earlier, it was really unbalanced. But the classic items are back: banana peels, shells, boo, fake item box, golden mushroom, lightning bolt, star, etc. However, there are 3 new items available. First, the bomb, which is no longer exclusive and can be thrown in front or behind and can explode on passing players. Then, the blooper, which spits ink on the screen and hinders players' visibility, which can be quite annoying. And the famous Bullet Bill, the rocket that will literally drive for players for a short time, bringing them back into the race and even avoiding lightning, allowing for incredible comebacks. The other big change is that players can be hit by red shells on the side of the kart, so sometimes they protect themselves with items, but that doesn't work. It remains traditional compared to previous Mario Kart games, but the Bullet Bill changes a lot of things. You can be in last place, get a Bullet Bill, and easily move up to 2nd or 3rd place. The comeback mechanic is more pronounced than in previous games, since the star and mushrooms also move faster than in previous games and seem to be much more important and powerful, leading to some really hotly contested races. The gameplay itself is quite traditional. No double characters on the karts like Double Dash. Mario Kart DS returns to the more classic formula of 1 character per kart and a much less chaotic formula than in Double Dash, where driving has more impact on the race outcome since there are fewer items, fewer shortcuts going in all directions, and moreover, there are no double items. But here too, snaking will quickly appear, but unlike Double Dash where snaking can ruin the races, here it's not as serious for 2 reasons. First, snaking is much easier to do. In Double Dash, it's really extreme physically to chain them together, and it's combined with other advanced techniques. Here it's more direct and easier to pull off, thanks to the fact that the karts are much easier to control and handle. It seems to be a mechanic really thought out and mastered by the game. For example, the first circuit is a circuit shaped like an 8, with very long and wide turns that make it easy to learn this snaking mechanic, and then slightly complicates it with the next circuit, Yoshi Falls, which is just a circle with shorter and slightly narrower turns, forcing the player to improve a bit on snaking. And like in Double Dash, you can avoid the blue shell without an item, but here it's much more difficult to do. Only some karts allow you to do so, and you have to release your drift at an extremely precise moment and also jump right after. It's rare to find someone who can do it regularly. There are other more advanced techniques like the PRB for prolonged rocket boost, but they are very difficult to use, so it bothers the players less, especially since Mario Kart DS was the first to really reach a huge audience, quadrupling the sales of its predecessor. And the particularity of this Mario Kart is also that, thanks to the second screen, you can see the course map in a detailed manner or in bird's eye view, and you can also see the items of other players. That may seem like a gimmick at first, but it's very useful. It often happened that when someone had a blue shell, the first player would slow down to let the others pass and avoid the blue shell, which sometimes led to crazy situations where everyone slowed down to avoid getting hit. But despite all the qualities I've praised, the best asset of Mario Kart DS is once again the races, which are perfectly suited to this gameplay and filled with brilliant ideas. Moreover, they link to many locations in the Mario universe, such as Luigi's Mansion or the flying boats from Super Mario Bros. 3. It's great to revisit these environments and race through them, but more importantly, it serves the gameplay because all these races require different driving styles. There is Delfino Square, where you drive through a small village with narrow streets and a bridge that goes up and down. There is Tick-Tock Clock from Super Mario 64, where you drive inside a clock with moving pendulums and gears. It's a brilliant idea. Then there are Peach Gardens with chain chomps roaming freely, Bowser's Castle, where you must avoid flames and manage to stay on that famous rotating cylinder, Rainbow Road with its incredible loop, Waluigi Pinball, which is an extraordinary idea. You drive inside a pinball machine with balls chasing you and buttons pushing you away. Every race has its own uniqueness, showcasing Nintendo's incredible imagination to always push the boundaries. But what's even more amazing is that in addition to the new tracks, Nintendo has remastered 16 circuits from previous Mario Kart games. 4 from Super Mario Kart, 4 from Mario Kart 64, 4 from Mario Kart Super Circuit, and 4 from Mario Kart Double Dash. This means you have 32 different tracks here, and what a breath of fresh air it is, especially considering that the tracks are really reworked, not just simple ports like on the GBA. Here you have the tracks from Super Circuit and Super Mario Kart finally in 3D, and they look amazing, like Sky Garden or Chocolate Island 2. However, some choices are debatable, like Baby Park, because the gameplay of Mario Kart DS is much less chaotic than that of Mario Kart Double Dash. The race is less interesting and loses its meaning, especially since it's faster too, with only 5 laps instead of 7. Still, it's incredibly impressive to have all of this on a handheld console with such high-quality tracks. And all these tracks and environments are also used in a big new feature, the Mission Mode. The Mission Mode is fantastic. It consists of a variety of different challenges ranging from easy to difficult that test your skills in various situations. Whether it's passing gates in order, performing turbo drifts, collecting coins, driving backward, using items to destroy enemies, or even driving in the wrong direction. These missions are great and add a lot of content to the game, which is very important for a handheld console game. The missions are divided into 6 levels of difficulty, and each of these levels ends with a boss battle, which is another great idea. What's smart is that, similar to the Grand Prix where ranks are given, when you complete a mission, a rank is assigned based on the time taken to finish the mission, encouraging replayability to earn all 3 stars. And when you finish all missions with a rank of 1 star or more, you unlock a 7th level of difficulty with even tougher missions. A nice way to reward the player for their efforts, especially since this level 7 wasn't even displayed on the mission screen, making it an unexpected surprise. And that's not the only thing to unlock in the game. You unlock new characters, new tracks, new karts, the mirror mode. There's a lot of solo content to unlock, which perfectly fits of a handheld console game. But the most fun in a Mario Kart game is obviously the multiplayer. And here too, Nintendo hasn't skimped and has done things intelligently. You can play with up to 8 players locally with just one cartridge and no wires thanks to the console's wireless connection. You can play the race mode, of course, or customize the rules, including difficulty, and even play in teams where points are added up after the race. A truly brilliant idea to balance the game and mix the strong players with the weaker ones while adding strategy to the use of items to avoid hitting players from the same team. It's a bit like what Double Dash wanted to do, but here in a freer way. There is also the balloon battle mode making its return, where you can even blow into the microphone to inflate the balloons, and now you can also steal balloons from enemies by using a mushroom and crashing into them. And there is a new mode called Shine Runners, where you have to collect as many shines as possible within a time limit and steal them from others, but unfortunately, it stops there. There is no bomb mode from Double Dash or the Shine Thief mode, both of which were excellent but were not included here. It's a bit disappointing as well that the battle mode maps like the Nintendo DS, the house with multiple rooms, the giant cake, and the small island are a little bit too wide. With the gameplay being less chaotic and these maps being more conventional, the battle mode is enjoyable but falls far short of the madness of Double Dash, where it was always pure chaos. It's good, but far from excellent in that regard. But what's clever from Nintendo's side is that if you're playing with friends who don't have the game, they can join you for free, but they'll be limited to playing as Shy Guy with his standard cart. It's a good move because it allows everyone to play casually. However, if you regularly play with friends, they'll eventually want to buy the game to unlock their favorite characters, carts, and access to all the courses. And if you don't have any friends, don't worry because Mario Kart DS is the first game in Nintendo's history to be playable online. Even though only about 20 races are available to play online and there's no battle mode, it's still remarkable considering it was 2004 and online gaming on consoles was still new. Having such a popular and universal franchise like Mario Kart available online was truly exceptional, and people were extremely receptive. Whether playing with friends or strangers, it provided a simple way to compete against others, which was something few people had experienced with previous installments. There's also even a rival mode that allows you to play against players of similar skill level, although at the time, there wasn't a sophisticated ELO system like today. It mostly relied on win-loss ratios. However, the only downside was that the DS was the most hacked console in history, leading to some cheating issues online for a while. Mario Kart DS truly is the ultimate Mario Kart experience. It exceeds all expectations by introducing exceptional and highly creative new courses, as well as integrating 16 remastered courses from previous games, which significantly enhances the multiplayer modes. Its standout feature is undoubtedly the new mission mode, which adds even more depth to the solo experience, along with the online mode that allows for easy multiplayer with friends or strangers. Its smart additions like the local team mode also refresh the experience by dynamically balancing skill levels, a concept that has endured. What's astonishing is that Mario Kart DS is a Mario Kart game on a handheld console, and only 4 years after Mario Kart Super Circuit, Nintendo created the most comprehensive Mario Kart game to date, while addressing some of the shortcomings of Mario Kart Double Dash. Mario Kart DS is clearly the most refined Mario Kart game and one of the best in the series, setting the foundation for modern Mario Kart games by introducing numerous innovations that have endured. Now the question remains, how will Nintendo approach the next installment, and how will they surpass this level of excellence? Mario Kart DS had a pretty complex development that left quite a few traces in the game. You can find plenty of unused tracks, like the Mario Circuit from Mario Kart Double Dash, 2 beta versions of the Waluigi Pinball that must have required a lot of work, and even some original and unreleased tracks that never made it into the series. It's pretty crazy to have so much unused content, especially considering that these tracks are still quite advanced for some. At E3 2004, Nintendo announced that they were working on a new home console with the codename Nintendo Revolution. After some bits of information here and there and a lot of rumors, it was finally unveiled at E3 2005 under the name Wii. It had the unique feature of using motion control as a central element of its gaming experience, as demonstrated through games like Wii Sports or Zelda Twilight Princess. Initially, the gaming world was skeptical of Nintendo's new direction, unconvinced by the concept of motion gaming. The Wii was released worldwide at the end of 2006, and sales struggled initially as many were cautious and saw no appeal in motion gaming. It wasn't until games like Super Mario Galaxy arrived and received constant praise from both journalists and players that the Wii's sales momentum began to intensify months after months. Internally, Nintendo initiates the beginning of a project aimed at creating a new Mario Kart for the Wii, but how to surpass Mario Kart DS, which journalists dubbed the ultimate Mario Kart, had to push the boundaries even further. Hideki Kano, director of Super Mario Kart, Mario Kart 64, and Mario Kart DS, has three major ideas in mind to take Mario Kart to the next level. Firstly, now that Nintendo has become familiar with online gaming, he wants online modes much more complete than those found in Mario Kart DS. Hideki Kano has the unique distinction of being one of the few high-ranking developers at Nintendo who plays online games in his spare time, so he knows that the online mode of Mario Kart DS has room for improvement. He wants a ranking system with points. He wants the ability to play with two players online on the same console. He wants all courses to be playable and much more. The second idea is to incorporate elements of extreme sports like motocross. Hideki Kano is a big fan of motocross, BMX, etc., and since Mario Kart 64, he wanted to introduce new types of vehicles such as bikes. However, every time he proposed this idea, he was told that seeing Mario on a motocross bike would be strange and would clash too much with the plumber's universe. But since Mario Kart 64, the Mario universe has expanded tremendously, with Mario engaging in various sports worldwide. Consequently, in Mario Kart DS, Kano really wanted to add these new vehicles, as seen with the tractor, backhoe, buggy, etc. However, the DS didn't allow for the addition of a completely new driving style, and adding Mario on a motocross bike could have excluded part of the female audience that the Nintendo DS was also targeting with games like Nintendogs, for example. But now with the Wii, he finally gets the green light to integrate this new idea. The development team goes through hundreds of bikes prototypes with Mario on them, and ultimately it looks really good and gives Mario quite a unique experience. And the third idea that Hideki Kano wants to work on is motion gaming. He wants to integrate a new way of driving using a steering wheel. He asks Kenichiro Ashida, a specialist in creating accessories for the Wii, to try to create a wheel that could be connected to the console. And Ashida doesn't do things by halves. He goes through over 30 prototypes, with lots of changes such as adding some buttons and different shapes for the wheel. He even has it tested by the voice actors for the games to get a fresh outside opinion, finally arriving at a version he considers perfect. The big challenge was to use components of good enough quality so that the accessory wouldn't age poorly and wear out quickly, but at the same time lightweight components since it had to be held out in front of you. Proud of their work, they even presented it at E3 2007, and I'll let you hear the journalist's reaction.
A custom Wii wheel that makes its debut with Mario Kart for Wii.
Yeah, it's a bit of a mixed reaction from the journalists. But that won't be the case for the players, who will be very receptive to the announcement since they will present a trailer of the game with some new races and new characters. Mario Kart Wii is announced for mid-2008, and the game's promotion builds excitement with new information, new ads, and the game finally arriving in the spring of 2008. And it's a hit. Sales are phenomenal, and the game is out of stock for weeks on end. The gaming press is won over, and the game is unanimously praised for the new features it brings while building on the foundation of Mario Kart DS. Whether new players or series regulars, Mario Kart Wii has won over everyone in no time. It's extremely impressive. It sells even more than Mario Kart DS. Despite being on a less popular console, it sells so well that it becomes one of the best-selling games of all time. And it's not for nothing. Mario Kart Wii is one of the best games in the entire series, still considered by many as the pinnacle of Mario Kart games to this day.
Yahoo! Come on! Oh yeah! Hey! Hey! Come on! Wow! So Mario Kart Wii! Woohoo! Mario Kart! Old Man Luigi!
Mario Kart Wii has a much more cheerful intro than Mario Kart DS, livelier, and as often the intro represents well the direction of the game. And right after the intro, there's an interesting change. There are 4 different save files materialized by these different licenses, a welcome novelty that will mainly serve for the game's online mode, where each license will have its rank, but we'll come back to that later. And one of the big novelties of the game, Mario Kart Wii, comes with an accessory, the famous wheel called the Wii Wheel. To use it, you just have to put the Wiimote into the Wii Wheel, and that's it. It's extremely simple. The Wii Wheel is cleverly designed. The way the buttons for driving are placed is very ergonomic, and it is very light. It has a B button at the back, which will, in turn, press the B button of the Wiimote, and it has a hole on the side, which still allows the use of the Wiimote on the Wii menu, and most importantly, the driving is precise and natural. So natural that some high-level players still drive with the Wii Wheel. However, the development team was afraid that no one would want to play with the wheel, so in addition to including it in the game bundle, they will highlight it quite a bit, like on the game box or on the title screen, even rewarding players who use the Wii Wheel with an icon next to their name. I know that today the wheel is seen as one of the many gadgets of the console, but it really was an argument that helped selling the game and a curiosity that pushed people to try it out, showing how versatile the Wiimote is and allowing for new ways to play. But what's interesting is that the game lets you choose how you want to play. The Wii Wheel is indeed highlighted, but you can play with the Pro Controller, the GameCube controller since the Wii has ports for the GameCube controller, or even the Wiimote Nunchuck combo. It's up to you to make your choice and play how you want without it affecting your skill level, because even at very high levels, you find all sorts. Beyond these new ways of playing, the other big novelty of the game is obviously the addition of bikes. In this new Mario Kart, you can select either karts or bikes, and each vehicle has its advantages over the other. Karts allow for 2 levels of drifting, and therefore have much longer mini-turbos than bikes, but bikes have the huge advantage of being able to perform wheelies, which increases speed. And that's possible at any time. As soon as there's a little straight line, you can do a wheelie and gain speed, which makes bikes more interesting than karts on most circuits. And what will make bikes even stronger than karts is mainly the feature of some bikes called inside draft vehicles. Inside draft vehicles are vehicles, exclusively specific bikes, that allow for extremely tight turns and more optimal driving trajectories, thus saving time everywhere, and they are also easier and more enjoyable to master. And this is a big balancing issue. There's absolutely no reason to use a kart or an outside draft vehicle rather than an inside draft vehicle. And even if you absolutely want to use a kart, you will struggle to compete at a high level, and you will be more or less forced to change, especially since ultimately only a few vehicles are truly viable and not choosing them penalizes you. But on the other hand, inside bikes are so enjoyable to control, the gameplay is so excellent and satisfying that this balancing issue is quickly forgotten. Especially since Nintendo has removed snaking, no more finger-straining constant left turns. In this game you will rather focus on using items and, most importantly, on taking good lines. And in the spirit of accessibility, for the first time you will have the choice between 2 drifting methods, automatic or manual. Manual is like previous games. You jump to drift during turns and negotiate your mini-turbo afterward. But you can also choose the automatic mode and allows drifting by holding a direction without losing speed. This makes driving more approachable, but at the same time, it's not as powerful as manual drifting, which ultimately strikes a good balance, especially for the family audience, the core target of the Nintendo Wii. The innovations don't stop there, because there is also a new gameplay mechanic, the addition of tricking, one of the best additions to the entire franchise. When you hit a ramp, jump, or any other element that sends us airborne, by shaking the wheel or the Wiimote, or pressing the D-pad on the Pro Controller or GameCube, you can perform an aerial trick with a very nice visual effect that gives a boost when you land. It may not seem like much, but it's a brilliant idea. It makes players more active in the race and diversifies the gameplay. That's the biggest strength of the game and why Mario Kart Wii has so many fans. Here, players are always active. You take a bike, you can wheelie everywhere, you can drift, you can use your items, you can draft, you can perform tricks, avoid obstacles. It's really great. The action keeps flowing so much that it becomes exhilarating. Even when you get hit, you can do a standstill mini turbo to restart faster, and the recovery boost is easier to perform when Lakitu drops players off. Ultimately, the best quality for a video game is to keep the player always active and engaged. It's reminiscent of the chaotic vibe from Mario Kart Double Dash, with constant mayhem, and it's heightened by a significant new feature. Now, 12 characters race simultaneously, compared to 8 previously. This changes a lot because now there's a big pack of racers in the middle, and when you take a hit, you lose places. You get immediately pummeled by everyone passing over you. You can go from first to last place in just a few seconds. On one hand, it adds a real sense of frenzy to the game, and mistakes are more punishing. But on the other hand, sometimes the resulting frustration is too strong. You get hit by a blue shell and then get pummeled by everyone without being able to do anything about it, which can be infuriating. However, to avoid getting pummeled too much, the alerts are back, and now they come directly from the Wiimote speaker, a very useful addition, especially when coupled with the ability to look behind at any time and thus keep an eye on your surroundings. A fantastic new feature that improves upon the rear view mirrors in the Double Dash beta. We've talked about one of the game's greatest strengths. Now let's discuss its biggest flaw. The game isn't very visually appealing. Well, it's decent, not bad, but we're far from what you would expect from Nintendo, especially considering the magnificent Super Mario Galaxy released in the meantime. Here, the 3D models are very blocky, even more so than in Double Dash, oddly enough. Just look at Bowser or Funky Kong, for example. The textures are a bit blurry on many tracks, but most notably, the colors are washed out. Compare it to Mario Kart Double Dash, and the difference is striking and surprising. It's a shame to have lost that flashy aspect that contributes to the atmosphere of the Mario Kart games and even the Mario universe in general, especially to end up with such a bland and dull artistic direction. And the other major flaw of the game is the battle mode. Here you're forced to play in teams of 6 drivers, and if there aren't enough players, CPUs are automatically added. Despite having 10 different arenas, 5 new ones, and 5 remastered from previous games, the battle mode has become much more boring. This is due to the new arenas being too large, resulting in less or even no encounters between players, but also because of a major rule change. Instead of having a limited number of balloons as in previous games, here you have a 3-minute time limit, and at the end of the 3 minutes, the team that has popped the most balloons wins. Between being forced to play in teams, the huge arenas, and this time limit, it removes all the excitement you could feel in previous games, where each balloon was super important, and as the number of balloons decreased, the atmosphere became tense, and the pressure intensified. But why did they make that choice? Well, to go hand in hand with another new feature of the game, the new online modes like the online battle mode. And so, since it's playable online, if you use the old rules where players are eliminated one by one, you can end up with 2 people circling each other for a while and the other 10 players watching. So by putting this time limit, it ensures that all players stay until the end, even if it removes all the tension it brought, especially with such large arenas. And so these drastic changes make the battle mode uninteresting and very few people play it. But fortunately, other qualities make up for this battle mode because unlike Mario Kart DS, where it was only possible to race online, and only 20 tracks out of the 32, Mario Kart Wii goes much further. First, it allows you to race on all the tracks online, all 32 tracks, but it also allows you to watch and exchange time trial ghosts with friends or strangers, which means you can check the ranking for each track and get the ghosts to practice, an excellent way to improve. But more importantly, Mario Kart Wii also introduces an ELO system based on your performance in races. And what's really well done with Mario Kart Wii is that you can climb up quickly if you chain top placements, and especially if you beat players who have a lot of points. And with gameplay as crazy as it is technical, it adds even more stakes to each race or each battle. Moreover, the game's online mode is excellent for its time. There's little lag or disconnection, and players were quickly matched up. On top of that, Nintendo regularly organized tournaments with more or less serious rules. It could be tournaments with classic rules, or more original ones like using only carts or only some vehicles, or even having to race in reverse on the track. An extremely complete and high-quality online mode that will really drive the game and create a very strong community. So strong that 16 years after the game's release, it's still active. And with these new online modes, the game also brings in new characters, 26 characters in total, including new ones like Baby Peach, Baby Daisy, or Dry Bowser, characters that don't offer much interest given their similarity to existing ones. But to balance things out, there are some excellent new and unexpected characters like Funky Kong straight from Donkey Kong Country, returning favorites like Boo or Bowser Jr., the beloved Rosalina from Super Mario Galaxy, and even Mies, which are a bit of a departure from the Mario universe. In terms of new additions, there are also new items, arguably the most criticized items in the entire series. There is the Mega Mushroom from New Super Mario Bros., which allows for a speed boost, offers protection from almost everything, and allows players to squash others. There's also the POW block from the original Mario Bros., which forces players to shake their controller to avoid losing speed, while also stripping them of their items. It's not a bad idea, but it's an item given to players in difficult positions that isn't all that useful for making a comeback. When you're in 9th place and that's the only item you get, it's a bit depressing. However, the most controversial item is the Thundercloud. The Thundercloud is the only item in Mario Kart history that is a penalty and electrocutes the player just like shock, but only affecting the player who holds it above their head. To get rid of it, you pass it on to other players by bumping into them, and the Thundercloud provides a significant acceleration boost, allowing players to even traverse off-road sections of the track without slowing down. The idea is brilliant and comes from Mario Kart Arcade GP, a series of Mario Kart spin-offs for arcades developed by Namco. However, it makes more sense in that spin-off since it's more focused on bumper car gameplay with very narrow tracks. Here, although the basic idea is amusing, it doesn't quite work in practice. Even though you feel the adrenaline rush when you have to quickly pass the cloud to someone else, it's too penalizing for players, especially since sometimes there are no other players nearby and you can't do anything about it. Additionally, it creates significant imbalances because at 7th place, you could get a Thundercloud or a Golden Mushroom, resulting in a huge gap between the two. However, obviously the most memorable aspect of the Mario Kart games is the tracks. I know I say this almost every time, but once again, the new tracks are exceptional and extremely creative. Even though you start with some simple and boring races like Luigi Circuit or Daisy Circuit, you quickly get to the creative ones. There's Toad Factory, which constructs item boxes and introduces conveyor belts as a gameplay element, with some boosting players and others slowing down. Then there's the Supermarket track with escalators where you have to guess the direction to take advantage of them. The Koopa Cape with its water flow to follow and underwater tubes, DK Summit, the downhill snowboarding circuit where you perform tricks everywhere, Wario's Mine with carts to avoid in the middle of the track, Maple Treeway, a race in a giant tree with bushes that provide items, and Wiggler as moving obstacles, Grumble Volcano with sections of the track collapsing over the laps, Bowser's Castle, which brings back the chaotic vibe of Mario Kart Double Dash with sharp turns and obstacles everywhere, even on the straightaway at the finish line, and Rainbow Road, which is truly exceptional with its references to Super Mario Galaxy, and is very challenging because it has many turns and boost pads, but no walls to keep the player from falling off. Once again, the new tracks are fantastic, bring plenty of gameplay ideas, and beautifully showcase the game's innovations. But just like in Mario Kart DS, you also have 16 remastered courses here. But they didn't just settle for remaking them. They integrated mechanics specific to Mario Kart Wii, like ramps for performing tricks, for example. It's a monumental effort that pushes the game to excellence, especially considering the retro track selections are really smart and fit well with the innovations of Mario Kart Wii. For instance, Bowser Castle 3 from Super Circuit with its ramps everywhere, perfect for performing tricks, or Delfino Square, a fairly narrow track that fits very well with the addition of bikes. What's interesting is that in Mario Kart Wii, there are quite a few shortcuts scattered throughout, but they don't necessarily save as much time as in previous games. Here there are fewer tricky shortcuts than in Double Dash, and fewer alternative routes where players split up and then regroup. In this game, the shortcuts are much trickier to navigate, but are extremely rewarding, and the gameplay is so deep and open that the community continues to discover even crazier ones. Mario Kart Wii epitomizes excellence. Nintendo has once again succeeded in revitalizing the gaming experience and improving the formula without changing its core. The addition of bikes and tricks, along with the circuit designs, has made players much more active during races, making the game more fun and wilder, while also being more technical. It's a thrilling rush of adrenaline with every race that makes it very addictive. The gameplay is so deep and satisfying that it completely overshadows all previous Mario Kart games. And this wild side is also seen in the crazy vehicles like a baby stroller, a witch's broom, a duck, or a Cheep Cheep that you will use on equally insane and imaginative races. With its comprehensive and well-executed online modes, various ways to play, and highly developed multiplayer, it's understandable how Mario Kart Wii has earned its reputation as the best Mario Kart game, even managing to overshadow its disappointing battle mode and balancing issues. Mario Kart Wii is extraordinary and truly showcases Nintendo's ability to constantly renew its gaming experiences to take them higher and further than anyone expected. It's no wonder that it remained the best-selling game in the series, thanks to its easy-to-pick-up gameplay and accessibility on one hand, and the depth of its gameplay on the other. It brought everyone together regardless of skill level. Now it's going to be extremely difficult to follow up such a great game and go even further, and indeed, Nintendo will have a tough time topping it. After the game's release in May 2008, an intense online competition ensues, with players vying for the best times and the top spots in the rankings. Records keep falling, then eventually stabilize. Then on June 1, 2008, a video appears on YouTube titled Mario Kart Wii Best Shortcut Ever. A player named Ridley discovered that by propelling oneself onto a rock in the background of Grumble Volcano using a mushroom and driving around this rock, the game counts it as a regular lap, allowing for completion in under 10 seconds. Initially used to finish one lap, then 2, and eventually 3, this method slashes the world record from 2 minutes and 6 seconds to 1 minute and 35 seconds, then further down to a mere 23 seconds in just one day, setting a flurry of consecutive records, a historic day in Mario Kart's history. This shortcut is the first of a long list of what came to be known as ultra shortcuts, shortcuts that completely break the races but are far more challenging to execute. Others would be discovered later with the help of tools on PC, but some were deemed so difficult that they were thought impossible for humans to do. However, in recent years, several exceptional players have managed to replicate a large portion of them, stunning everyone, such as the Rainbow Road shortcut, once believed to be too difficult and precise, until a French player named Arthur succeeded in doing it live, claiming the world record. At E3 2010, Nintendo unveils the Nintendo 3DS, the console set to succeed the Nintendo DS, boasting similar features including dual screens and a touchscreen, but most notably a glasses-free 3D display, a surprising technical feat at a time when 3D cinema and 3D televisions were all the rage. However, the issue was that Nintendo had just released the DSi and DSi XL, and the public perceived the 3DS as yet another variant of the Nintendo DS, leading to tiredness with the continuous stream of iterations. Despite Nintendo's announcement of a slew of games including Kid Icarus, Final Fantasy, Metal Gear Solid, Batman, Animal Crossing, Star Fox 64, The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, and even a new Mario Kart, the public's interest in the console remained lukewarm. The damage had been done. Analysts are highly skeptical about this new handheld console, citing competition from the PS Vita and, more notably, smartphones, which had become ubiquitous. With a price tag of $250 at the time, many believe the console will struggle to find its public. The 3DS is released in early 2011 worldwide, but sales are disappointing as anticipated. Nintendo is forced to step up its efforts and expedite game development to ensure a quick influx of titles onto the console. The development for a new Mario Kart began in late 2010, but very few people are currently assigned to the project. The priority at the moment is Nintendogs plus Cats, and also The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword for the franchise's 25th anniversary, which is proving to be a challenge for the Nintendo team. However, now that the 3DS has had a very rocky start, even though development for this new Mario Kart game is at a standstill, it absolutely must be released by the end of 2011. The 3DS is struggling to sell, and Nintendo cannot afford to miss the mark, even though it will be very difficult to follow up on the success of Mario Kart DS and Mario Kart Wii, both of which elevated the Mario Kart series from popular to essential, surpassing sales figures of previous games. Nintendo, in a state of panic, then sought help from Retro Studios, the renowned studio behind the excellent Metroid Prime and Donkey Kong Country Returns, with the goal of finishing the game before the end of the year and assigning them the task of developing the retro tracks for this installment. Meanwhile, Nintendo focused on the new tracks and gameplay, drawing on advanced ideas from the development of Mario Kart Wii, such as the ability to go underwater or glide through the air. They also wanted to use the console's gyroscope for kart control, but found it too challenging to control the kart from a rear-view perspective. Therefore, they chose to add an interior view of the kart for more comfortable control. After months of complex development, several trailers were showcased, and the game was ready in time for the end of 2011. It was released in December 2011 and received a rather lukewarm reception from some journalists who found it far from the level of Mario Kart Wii and Mario Kart DS. However, players were impressed by its stunning glasses-free 3D graphics, but gradually, they too began to criticize a lot of aspects of the game and its glaring lack of content. Indeed, Mario Kart 7 fell short on some fronts. As always, the game's introduction gives us good clues about the direction of the game, and here we can see a very classic and sterile intro that already hints at the problems throughout the game. Starting with the name itself, Mario Kart 7. It's somewhat confusing and reminiscent of RPG series. It doesn't really make sense to add a number as if players needed to have played the previous games. Nintendo seemed to have struggled to find a name for the game, as it was initially just called Mario Kart, which might explain this somewhat impersonal title. They probably avoided naming it Mario Kart 3DS because game titles ending with 3DS or 3D often indicated a 3D remake or remaster of the series, like Star Fox, for example. Hence, they went with Mario Kart 7. They could have followed the approach of Super Circuit and Double Dash, giving it a name that references its new features. However, there isn't much that's truly new in this installment. In fact, there are quite a few things missing. First major issue right off the bat, the disappearance of bikes, the main element of Mario Kart Wii that revolutionized the series and introduced a new way of playing the game. Here they have miraculously vanished, perhaps due to time constraints or balancing issues. But it's hard to accept given how enjoyable and fun the gameplay was on the Wii with those bikes. Another missing feature is the absence of a mission mode. Gone are the fantastic missions from Mario Kart DS that provided solo content, which is essential for a portable console game that players revisit regularly. Also missing are the periodic missions and online tournaments from Nintendo that used to add regular content updates, as was the case with Mario Kart Wii. In terms of solo content, all we have are the Grand Prix, time trials, and battles, bringing us back to Super Mario Kart 20 years ago. And the Versus mode has also disappeared for an unknown reason. The Versus mode allowed you to select and play any course you wanted with the rules you wanted, so it's impossible to practice with items on a selected course. There's only the Battle mode left, and let's talk about the Battle mode. It has exactly the same problem as the Battle mode in Mario Kart Wii, a time limit that prevents you from fully enjoying it, with that tension-building idea and maps that are still too large, although they are much better than on the Wii. There are 3 new maps for this mode, and 3 old ones remastered, But due to these boring rules, unfortunately, no one plays battle mode online. In solo and local multiplayer, the rules are slightly customizable, but not enough. We still can't remove the presence of CPUs or the time limit, unfortunately, even though these modes are meant to be played in local multiplayer, where they shine the most. It's a shame they've been a bit rushed, and it's even worse for the Coin Runners mode, where you just go around in circles for 2 minutes collecting coins without really bumping into each other. This mode is boring because it seems like nothing happens every time. Fortunately, there are still some new features. One of the major highlights is the kart customization. Here you can choose the kart, the wheels, and the glider from a list of options. The idea sounds great on paper, being able to customize your kart to the maximum and get creative with it, especially with a wide variety of different elements to choose from. However, in practice, it's not as good. Firstly, it unnecessarily complicates the choice of vehicle and takes away the charm of the vehicles made by Nintendo in previous games. It was fantastic to have options like a broomstick, a duck, a vacuum cleaner, a crane, a stroller, or even a unicycle as vehicles, and it was much simpler and quicker to choose. Here, it's not a bad idea, but it's not necessarily better, and the glider doesn't seem to affect the stats much and appears to serve no real purpose. But the biggest issue is how they are unlocked. Mario Kart 7 reintroduces coins, which had disappeared after Mario Kart Super Circuit. But why bring back coins? Well, we don't know exactly. It's a somewhat strange choice that raises questions, but I suppose they realized that driving felt dull compared to Mario Kart Wii and its bikes, which allowed for wheelies and made players more active. They were probably added to avoid returning to straight lines, where not much happens, and to add some depth to the gameplay. However, their usefulness can be questioned, since coins overly favor the leaders who can easily collect them, while players behind may struggle to collect them or be forced to take less optimal paths, thus seeming to unbalance the game since every coin gives a boost. And also now, every time you get hit, you lose time twice, because you lose time from getting hit and also from losing some coins. However, these coins also serve to unlock vehicle customization elements, which seems even more questionable as a choice. Additionally, these elements unlock in a random order, so if you want to play with a specific element, you'll have to be patient and hope for luck. You need to collect a minimum of 5,000 coins to unlock everything, which means 500 races minimum since you can only collect a maximum of 10 coins per race. But typically, players end races with 6 or 7 coins, meaning it's more like over 700 races to unlock everything. It's truly a ludicrous choice that forces players to grind endlessly to unlock content, regardless of their performance. In previous games, you had to win cups with good rankings to unlock new vehicles. Here, you just have to play for dozens of hours, which is silly because it doesn't encourage the player to perform well like before. Instead, it just forces them to play over and over again. And to top it off, one of the methods to unlock the gold customization items is through coins, and it requires up to 20,000 coins. That's over 3,000 races if you're getting 6 to 7 coins per race. I don't know what they were thinking by choosing to reward playing so many races rather than rewarding good performance and player progression, but it's a very questionable reasoning. The Mario Kart games are known for each having their own identity, vision, and differences, making them unique games. However, Mario Kart 7 is a bit of an exception. From the title screen to the menu, game modes, icons, and music, it all feels very generic. Even the characters seem forced. You have the classic Mario, Luigi, Peach, etc., but the new characters like Wiggler are surprising, considering they're usually seen as obstacles in the course. The presence of the Queen Bee from Super Mario Galaxy is also puzzling, as she's not a prominent figure in the Mario universe. Then there's Metal Mario, basically just a 3D model of Mario with different textures and a robotic voice. According to the official website, Metal Mario is now portrayed as a rival to Mario, which is a departure from his original role as a power-up in Super Mario 64. Perhaps it's a nod to Super Smash Bros. 64, where you have to defeat a Metal Mario in the classic mode. Other new characters like Shy Guy or Lakitu lack interest, either being too generic or completely insignificant. And most importantly, where are Waluigi, King Boo, Funky Kong? The player's favorite characters have disappeared without much explanation. And the same issues arises with the items. There are quite a few surprising changes. Gone are the POW block, the Mega Mushroom, the Thunder Cloud, and the fake item box. Instead, this game introduces 3 new items: the Fire Flower, which was originally exclusive to Mario and Luigi in Double Dash, but now has some modifications. It's a decent and welcome addition, allowing players to throw fireballs forwards or backwards. Then there is the Super Leaf, which gives players the Tanuki tail from Super Mario Bros. 3, allowing them to swipe at other players and deflect projectiles. Finally, there's the Lucky 7, which grants 7 useful items when you're in a tight spot. But these items can be stolen since they orbit around you. The problem with all these new items is that they assume other players are nearby. However, since Mario Kart 7 reverts to having only 8 racers instead of 12 in Mario Kart Wii, the races feel less crowded, and these items often end up being ineffective most of the time. In terms of gameplay, they have exactly the same mechanics as the karts in Mario Kart Wii, so that's a really solid but classic gameplay. There's also the option to use gyroscope of the 3DS for steering, along with a cockpit view, but it's far too sensitive to be usable at a high level. Even slight movements of the console can send the kart veering off course abruptly, and it requires a great deal of precision to control effectively, especially considering that tilting the console disrupts the 3D effect on the upper screen and can strain the eyes. However, the classic gameplay remains very solid and enjoyable, and it's enhanced by a fantastic new feature: the ability to drive underwater and glide with a parasail. Even though movement underwater is a bit slower due to the different physics, I find this idea exceptional because it pushes the boundaries set by previous games where water was merely an obstacle. Here, it's seemingly integrated into the track design, complementing the game's excellent stereoscopic 3D effects. These effects are particularly impressive when driving in and out of the water or gliding through the air. Mario Kart 7, along with Super Mario 3D Land, stands as one of the few games that demonstrated from the outset of the console's release that stereoscopic 3D could offer genuine advantages in specific games. The immersion it provides is excellent, although I'm unable to demonstrate it to you, unfortunately. And for once, the races in the game aren't as convincing as usual. There's a considerable gap between extraordinary races and boring ones. The first 3 races are already very dull. The Toad Circuit, Daisy Hills, and Cheep Cheep Lagoon are there to teach the basics of the game, such as going underwater, gliding, and drifting with very wide turns. The first time you do them, they may seem impressive, but by the second time, they become very mundane and uninteresting. It might have been smarter to introduce all the new features in a single race, going underwater and gliding directly in the first race, and then letting the subsequent races bring more interesting circuits. Fortunately, there are some truly great races that use the game's innovations very well, like Wario Shipyard, a race in an abandoned ship underwater with an original environment; Koopa City, a very technical race with a magnificent rain effect using the console's 3D; Mount Wario, which is a real adventure and gives a huge sense of freedom with clever use of the glider and the mountain ascent with rocks falling on you; Woohoo Loop and Woohoo Mountain Loop, races in the form of sprints with only 1 lap; the Mario Circuit with its magnificent cherry blossom trees, which also give a superb effect with the console's 3D. And there are 2 races that are really above all the rest. The first is the musical track, where you roll over instruments that set the pace of the race when you pass over them. A brilliant idea both in terms of music and track design, as it brings a very original circuit to cruise through. And the other one is the Rainbow Road, which is exceptional. You go into space, roll over the rings of a planet, then amidst asteroids, and then directly on the moon and its craters, all in a single lap with magnificent music and a 3D effect so well done that Smash Bros. Will adopt this effect for one of its stages on 3DS. As for the retro tracks, what's interesting is that they will be remastered both graphically and to incorporate new elements, namely the tricks from Mario Kart Wii, but also the ability to go underwater and glide. And for some of these courses, it changes quite a lot, like the Mushroom Gorge or Koopa Beach, for example. The work done on this is admirable, even if there are some inconsistencies or surprising choices in some retro courses, as they don't add much, like Luigi Raceway from Mario Kart 64, which originally was there to showcase drifting in Mario Kart 64, but now, as Toad Circuit already serves that purpose, it seems unnecessary, especially since the changes made are minor compared to the original course. Despite the undeniable quality of the majority of its courses, Mario Kart 7 is a somewhat disappointing game. Disappointing because its content is too thin, as seen with the disappearance of the mission mode and versus race. Disappointing because its gameplay is less deep than that of Mario Kart Wii, removing bikes and reverting to 8 players instead of 12. Disappointing because it also removes popular characters to replace them with trivial ones. Disappointing because its online multiplayer is less refined than that of Mario Kart Wii. Disappointing because it reintroduces coins that were abandoned for balancing reasons. Disappointing because the kart customization elements add a layer of complexity the game didn't necessarily need. All of this is likely the result of a complicated and rushed development process to help a console that started off too slowly. But what's incredible about Nintendo is that even under these conditions, they managed to release a game with many strengths and some great innovations, such as having sprint races with just one lap, which adds variety to the gameplay, or the ability to drive underwater and glide, innovations that push the boundaries of Mario Kart tracks even further. And make no mistake, the Mario Kart formula still works wonderfully, and the game is a lot of fun, especially with friends. Mario Kart 7 is a good game, but an insufficient Mario Kart. Let's hope that the next one, planned for the Wii U, puts the series back in pole position on a console that's once again facing a tough start. I had mentioned in the Mario Kart Wii anecdote that some shortcuts can disrupt races, like on Grumble Volcano, and to prevent this in Mario Kart 7, Nintendo seems to have made Lakitu smarter, automatically retrieving players when they stray just a little from the course. However, a few weeks after the game's release, glitches were found on 3 courses: Woohoo Mountain Loop, Woohoo Island Loop, and Bowser's Castle. These glitches take advantage of Lakitu's new behavior. When falling into specific areas, Lakitu believes the player is further along in the race and skips them ahead significantly. Nintendo did release an update that fixes these bugs, but only for online play. They can still be performed in time trials or local play. Once again, it's at E3 2011 that Nintendo unveils and showcases its new console, the Wii U. The presentation is disastrous. Nobody understands this new console, and the announcements failed to make the impact Nintendo had hoped for. The launch looks to be very challenging, and Nintendo makes numerous announcements in an attempt to salvage what they can, but unfortunately without much success. The Wii U is released in late 2012, and due to this disastrous communication, the start is timid, and sales subsequently plummet. Communication appears to have hastened this downfall, but the lineup of games available on the console is also highly criticized. The only Nintendo games available at launch are Nintendo Land and New Super Mario Bros. U, both of which go relatively unnoticed. Nintendo Land is hardly promoted, and New Super Mario Bros. U is considered just another game in the New Super Mario Bros. Series, which is starting to wear thin. Nintendo is in deep trouble, and they desperately need to release big games to try to stay afloat, turn things around, and save this console. With this goal in mind, Nintendo initiates the development of a new Mario Kart for the Wii U around 2012, focusing on 3 main ideas. The first idea is to reintroduce the bikes from Mario Kart Wii, while ensuring they are balanced so as to not be stronger than the karts. This proves to be a very challenging task, as it requires a complete overhaul of their mechanics, including the ability to perform wheelies and gain speed. The second idea is to incorporate the mechanics introduced in Mario Kart 7, namely the ability to drive underwater and glide, and to better integrate them into more dynamic courses. Lastly, the third idea involves introducing a new driving mechanic. Initially considering underground courses, the development team ultimately draws inspiration from the Rainbow Road in Mario Kart 7, itself inspired by Super Mario Galaxy, leading to the concept of a gravity-based system allowing players to drive on inclined surfaces. The problem is that the development is progressing too slowly. Creating the environments and courses, as well as transitioning to HD, takes more time than anticipated, and Nintendo has underestimated the workload involved. However, they are determined not to rush the game and risk any shortcomings, as was seemingly the case with Mario Kart 7. Mario Kart 8 is highly anticipated and needs to help the Wii U gain momentum, so it must be flawless. So Nintendo seeks assistance from Bandai Namco, who helped with the development of Super Smash Bros. For Wii U. for some aspects of the game, allowing them to focus on the essentials and avoid cutting corners. Development is progressing more smoothly and should be ready for release in 2014, which is expected to be a pivotal year for the Wii U, with the launch of Mario Kart, Super Smash Bros. For Wii U, Splatoon, and many other games. Nintendo releases a big trailer for the game at E3 2013, and everyone is blown away. The game looks stunning and appears to be completely wild with fantastic mechanics and innovations, but it's still a year away. Players' disappointment is palpable at that moment. The Wii U lacked games, and knowing that they would have to wait a year for this new Mario Kart, which looked fantastic, was very demoralizing. The months go by, and at the end of 2013, another trailer, still as stunning, is shared by Nintendo, eliciting many positive reactions. Then 2014 arrives, and Nintendo hosts a Mario Kart 8 Direct, showcasing the game's new mechanics, courses, and even presenting the vehicles in detail. It was really rare for Nintendo to do something like that at the time, and it really highlights the game with many convincing elements in this Direct. After months of anticipation and a grand build-up from Nintendo with increasingly beautiful, complete, and wild trailers, along with the reveal of the stunning box art showcasing the game's innovations, it finally arrives on May 30th, 2014. Its release causes a surge in Wii U sales, but surprisingly, the game struggles to convince journalists who criticize it for various reasons. Despite receiving good ratings overall, players are completely convinced by this title at first, only to later encounter emerging critiques. So are these criticisms justified? Why did journalists express so many reservations about the game when, for many players, it's the best Mario Kart in the series? Let's delve into this in detail right away.
Mario Kart 8!
What a superb introduction and what catchy music! It's clear that we're witnessing the first Mario Kart in HD. The game's graphics are stunning, from the intro to the meticulously crafted courses teeming with detail. Just take a look at the giant screen at the Mushroom Dome, the Koopa Beach from Mario Kart 64 visible in the background at the Sunshine Airport, the Yoshi Valley fruits straight out of Super Mario Galaxy, the vines bursting out of a block in the Cloud Top Cruise, referencing the original Super Mario Bros. There are dozens of details in each course, showcasing the incredible amount of work that went into them. This not only immerses players deeper into the Mario universe, but also connects the courses with each other and the rest of the game, such as with the Mario Kart TV cameras that follow you during races. The graphical aspect and these added details make the races much more engaging and less monotonous. Additionally, the character models are highly detailed and well animated. In fact, the natural animation of Mario's mustache was a marketing highlight during the game's promotion. Mario Kart 8's visual appeal is outstanding, making it one of Nintendo's most beautiful games upon release. Even 10 years later, it remains graphically impressive, especially considering it was developed for a console that lagged behind its competitors in terms of technical specs. And all these details are even more appreciated considering that we get to experience the races from every angle thanks to the famous new feature introduced in Mario Kart 8, anti-gravity. In addition to being able to drive underwater and glide, in Mario Kart 8 you can now race on walls and even on the ceiling. But you can't do this anywhere. The areas where you can do that are indicated by a blue strip, and when you cross it, your kart switches to anti-gravity mode. Ironically, it's reminiscent of the early betas of Super Mario Kart with karts levitating a bit like in F-Zero. Anti-gravity was heavily promoted in all the game trailers, on the game box, in interviews. So many saw it as a revolution that would change everything. And ultimately, anti-gravity doesn't change much in terms of gameplay, if anything at all. Look here, for example. I'm supposed to be driving on the ceiling upside down over a void, but since the camera is right behind the cart and follows its orientation, You don't have that sensation of being on the ceiling with your head upside down at all. It really feels like driving normally. It's a bit disappointing compared to the camera angles used in the trailers. There are only some walls where you'll get the true sensation of driving on walls. But other than that, nothing revolutionary, at least in terms of gameplay, except for a small boost when hitting other anti-gravity affected objects. Where anti-gravity really shines is what it allows for in race design. In the previous Mario Kart games, I talked about some tracks being better than others, but in Mario Kart 8, they are all at least interesting and often excellent. There's not a single one lacking inspiration or lacking interest. They go in all directions with plenty of alternate paths or shortcuts. And they even evolve during the race, like in Thwomp Temple, where a passage opens up after a certain time and with plenty of elements that make the race truly lively, like the trains in Toad's Harbor, for example. With this major innovation, the tracks are much more open, sometimes even with a slight sense of exploration. Each of these courses carries a unique idea, ambiance, and atmosphere that make them stand out. You start with the Mario Kart Stadium, which effectively introduces anti-gravity and gliding. Then you dive into an aquatic amusement park that reinforces the anti-gravity aspect while also introducing underwater driving. Next, you drive through a food-themed track, followed by a figure-8-shaped Mobius strip, which also serves as the game's logo. You take a leisurely stroll through Toad's Harbor, navigate a submerged and distorted mansion with surreal track layouts, cascade down a towering waterfall, cruise through an airport including a trip inside an airplane, perform stunts on the Super Mario 64 eel, skill down a track in one of the most beloved courses for its originality, drive across clouds and vines reminiscent of Super Mario Bros., dodge attacks from a towering Bowser and statues shooting laser beams. It's incredible how exceptionally varied these new courses are and how they make superb use of anti-gravity in their design, resulting in tracks that are downright crazy in the best possible way. The only slight drawback is the Rainbow Road set in a space station, which, while good, lacks the mythical ambiance and universe of the others. And like its predecessors, Mario Kart 8 features 16 remastered courses for the occasion. But here, we're not just talking about remasters. These are practically brand new tracks, so drastically changed and completely reimagined. In previous Mario Kart games, you could easily tell which courses were new and which ones were from older games at a glance. But here, they've been overhauled to such an extent that it's much harder to discern, both in terms of graphics and gameplay ideas. Nintendo has added anti-gravity sections, underwater segments, gliding parts, and has even completely redesigned the tracks. For some, it's astounding the monumental work put into each of these courses, even the remastered ones. But one could also argue that these courses have changed too much, perhaps to the point of losing their original essence. For instance, Mario Kart 64's Rainbow Road has gone from being a very long race of over 5 minutes that demands a lot of patience and concentration to a much shorter and completely different track. Similarly, Yoshi Valley, which used to be much more labyrinthine and didn't show players' positions, leaving you feeling lost throughout the race without your usual landmarks, has been changed to a more conventional and less wild track that doesn't really stand out from the others. The same goes for Toad's Turnpike, which used to be much more challenging with more present vehicles, leaving little room for players to drive, and is now much wider and a lot easier. Another issue with the track layouts is that there are far too many shortcuts towards the end, off the beaten path, leading to a totally crazy final sprint, especially since the positions disappear just a few meters from the finish line. But this feels too artificial and unfair at times, especially considering there are so many shortcuts practically in every race. But overall, they are truly excellent both in terms of level design and graphically, and they surpass the previous games in their unpredictable layout. And what really enhances these courses is the incredible musical work throughout the game. Mario Kart 8 is the first to feature orchestrated music recorded live, evident from the introduction with its magnificent theme. But more importantly, the music is dynamic, with instruments changing depending on some elements. For example, when diving underwater, the music takes on a muffled effect to represent immersion. And when re-emerging, the instruments change, adding dynamism. Similarly, when entering and exiting the metallic section on Cloud Top Cruise, the music adapts accordingly. These ideas extend to gameplay, such as the addition of drums when in first place, further intensifying the action and naturally rewarding the race leader. Even the menus feature evolving music that becomes increasingly complete as you select modes and characters. Moreover, the prevalent jazz vibe with the omnipresent saxophone ties Mario Kart 8 to other Mario titles on the console, further solidifying its connection to the Mario universe. This style is reminiscent of what was used in games like Super Mario 3D World around the same time. Additionally, akin to the 3DS version, Mario Kart 8 incorporates a course that interacts with the music, taking this concept even further than Mario Kart 7's music park, showcasing the game's incredible musical compositions. And the music even serves as a weapon with a new item, the horn. This item allows players to protect themselves from projectiles, knock nearby opponents, and most importantly, shatter the dreaded blue shell, potentially altering the outcome of a race, though obtaining a horn while in first place is quite rare. But that's not the only change. Mario Kart 8 introduces the boomerang, an item that can be thrown forward or backward 3 times, reaching opponents from a considerable distance. There's also the Lucky 8, similar to the Lucky 7 but with an additional item, and the Piranha Plant, which not only accelerates but also bites nearby opponents, providing a more fitting adaptation to the wider tracks compared to the Tanuki Tail from Mario Kart 7. But the biggest change in terms of items in Mario Kart 8 is that here, players can no longer hold multiple items simultaneously. You can't, for example, hold a banana or shell behind you for defense, while also having another item in reserve. Instead, the item held behind you also occupies the reserve slot. Additionally, players can now obtain coins as items, adding a strategic layer to item usage. Should I drop my banana to block the shortcut for other players, risk losing my protection? Or should I hold onto my defense just in case? It's a great philosophy, and the same applies to the horn. Do I use it to knock out opponents, or do I keep it to defend against the dreaded blue shell while aiming for first place? And the other major change regarding items is that, as in Mario Kart 7, they are distributed based on the distance between players and the leader of the race. This means that players can receive items like golden mushrooms or even stars without necessarily being at the back of the pack. This leads to a very balanced distribution of items, perhaps too balanced. In previous installments, there was a wild aspect where a player in 7th place could suddenly leap to first with a golden mushroom, but here it's much more clinical. Everyone tends to have access to powerful items because the leader is often far collecting coins at ease. As a result, everyone accelerates, making it more challenging to gain positions. It's not uncommon to find oneself in 7th or 8th place, using 3 mushrooms or a star, only to remain in the same position afterward because everyone else also received similar items. This flattens the excitement of the races, although it must be acknowledged that the balance achieved with these items leads to fairer competitions. Unfortunately, despite being packed with quality as we've seen, the game also has quite a few flaws. Firstly, it inherits the flaws of Mario Kart 7, namely the coins in races, vehicle customization, and especially the still rather silly way of unlocking customization elements by farming coins in races while being limited to just 10 coins per race. I won't repeat the same criticisms as in Mario Kart 7, but it's uninteresting. It rewards playtime rather than performance. It's random, and it forces players to do thousands of races just to unlock everything, which can be really frustrating. In terms of characters, Mario Kart 8 has the largest number of characters ever seen in a Mario Kart game, with around 30 different characters. However, the problem is that the character lineup is very strange, with far too many similar babies like Baby Peach, Baby Luigi, Baby Mario, or Baby Daisy, who all look terribly alike. Additionally, there are the Koopalings, Wendy, Iggy, and Ludwig, who also bear a striking resemblance to each other, besides lacking interest in the Mario universe. Moreover, there are redundant characters like Metal Mario, who is just Mario with a different texture, or Pink Gold Peach, who is essentially Peach with a different color and comes across as somewhat ridiculous. Most notably, there seems to be a lack of important characters from the Mario universe. Why include the Koopalings and babies but exclude Bowser Jr., Diddy Kong, Drybones, Birdo, King Boo, or Funky Kong? It's really disappointing in terms of the character roster, even though you still have the classic characters and the return of Waluigi. Once again, to unlock them, there's nothing interesting. You just have to finish first in the Grand Prix races, but the order in which they unlock is random, which can also be problematic. And these characters will get to experience the joy of riding bikes again because Mario Kart 8 reintroduces bikes, which first appeared in Mario Kart Wii. However, these are not the same bikes from Mario Kart Wii. You can no longer perform continuous wheelies to gain speed. The bikes are now primarily used for taking tighter and sharper turns compared to karts, which have better straight-line speed. It's a rather strange way to balance the game, where bikes may have advantages on some courses over karts and vice versa. But what's disappointing is that, for those who enjoyed the thrill of riding bikes in Mario Kart Wii, they would have loved to see them return in these wild races, especially with the addition of underwater driving, gliding, and anti-gravity. It would have made the gameplay much more dynamic and completely insane. Additionally, it would have aligned well with another major gameplay change. Lakitu now recovers players much faster when they fall off the tracks, removing the black screen and 10 seconds of lost time. Everything moves much quicker here, adding a lot of paces, but at the same time, it punishes mistakes less, resulting in a rather forgiving and more traditional gameplay compared to previous games. But there's one thing that's going to save the gameplay and make it totally insane for a lot of players. A few days after the game came out, some kind of glitch was found that lets you keep your mini turbos going longer and go faster. Because of the anti-gravity, Nintendo had to tweak the drifting in the game, and now the mini turbos last for a while, but that time only counts down when the car is in contact with the ground. So if you jump, you can make it last longer, much longer even, and it makes the gameplay totally nuts mechanically. It's not as strong as the snaking in some previous episodes, but still pretty good even if it's much harder to master. So it doesn't really mess up online races that much because it's tough to pull off online with all the chaos going on. And the online mode has changed a lot, and it's actually pretty good. First off, it's been completely overhauled so that as soon as you connect, you find an open lobby right away without having to wait, whereas before you were in spectator mode during a race before being able to join. And in the race selection now, you have the choice between 3 tracks or random. Everything is done to speed up the pace, which is a good idea, but it would be even better to have multiple races in a row, and then return to voting rather than doing one race, then voting again, then a new race, etc. And the other problem is how the race points are managed, which is similar to Mario Kart 7. In Mario Kart Wii, you can rise and fall quickly depending on your performance and who you manage to beat. But here you can hardly fall, and you rise very slowly, gaining a maximum of 25 or 30 points per race. And so you'll go through hundreds of races before finally meeting people who are roughly at your level, especially when you already have the basics of the game from playing previous Mario Kart games. Hundreds of races is really very long, and it completely unbalances the online game, whereas in Mario Kart Wii, it only took about 20 races to rise up and face good players. And the online mode is one of the main draws of the game since it lacks content otherwise. The Grand Prix races are kind of boring because the AI is really bad and kills the interest of the races. But the worst part is the battle mode, which is ridiculous. There isn't even an arena for the battle mode. They just reuse tracks, except the tracks are not meant for that, so they are 100 times too big and not at all suitable. So you don't encounter anyone during the game. It's ridiculous. They probably didn't have time to make them and rushed the game out because the Wii U was off to a catastrophic start, but this is really inadequate. They should have at least reused the old arenas. Using tracks as battle arenas is a big admission of weakness. Plus, even in terms of rules, it's questionable. Eliminated players come back as ghosts and can make others lose balloons, which seems unfair. There's no mission mode, either solo or online, making the online mode less complete than that of Mario Kart Wii. There's no coin battle, no shine thief or bomb-on battle. There's not much to do outside of races, unlike previous games. But the main appeal of Mario Kart is the local multiplayer mode. But the problem with local multiplayer is that the frame rate drops to 30 FPS when playing with 3 or more, which again suggests that the game was rushed towards the end of development. And it's also evident in something else. When playing local multiplayer, you might think that one player has their own screen on the gamepad and the others play on the TV with split screen. But not even that. On the gamepad, the screen is split as well, which is really weird. Moreover, the gamepad serves no purpose in the game. By default, there's a big honk and you can look at the map or have the same view as on the TV. It's a confession of failure when the game that is supposed to save the console uses its main selling point to display just a horn. It's easy to understand why nobody understood the point of the Wii U's gamepad. They could have displayed what's happening behind the player with a rear-view mirror or something like that. Unfortunately, there's none of that. And unfortunately, one of the most mentioned flaws by journalists about the game is that there's very little sense of speed. The game drags on to the point of boredom on some tracks because even at 150cc, it feels like you're going very slowly. And remember that online, you have to go through hundreds of races at 100cc to earn enough points and be able to play at 150cc, which further contributes to bringing this feeling of slowness and boredom on some wide tracks with long straightaways. But Nintendo addressed this issue because several months after the game's release, they announced a Season Pass, which we'll discuss shortly, but more importantly, a free update that adds the 200cc mode. And this 200cc mode is insane. The tracks are not designed to be played at 200cc, and it makes it truly wild. It goes so fast and in all directions that you finally get the action you were hoping for. It's amazing. This 200cc mode is an excellent response from Nintendo to these criticisms, and above all, it reconnects with the importance of the racing part, adding an exceptional depth, especially since Nintendo has thought of everything, and even allows us to finally use mechanics that are rarely used elsewhere, like brake drifting, which allows you to brake in the middle of a drift without losing it, and therefore take sharp turns in 200cc, since you can slow down and then quickly accelerate by releasing the drift. You feel this madness and frenzy when doing challenging races like the Rainbow Road in 200cc. This incredible adrenaline rush with the turns coming one after the other and non-stop action. With this update, they'll also add Mercedes customization elements following a collaboration with the brand, and frankly, on one hand, it's amusing, but on the other hand, it clashes way too much with the Mario universe. And this will also be somewhat reflected in the Season Pass. The Season Pass consists of 2 DLCs, each containing 8 new tracks, 3 new characters, and 4 new vehicles. Honestly, I hate DLCs in games, and even though on the content side I find these DLCs rather fair and really cheap, especially for the work provided, I really don't like the excessive fan service they brought. First off, Tanuki Mario, Cat Peach, and Gold Mario were still in recycled characters of the original ones, but above all, there's too much fan service. The first DLC is even called The Legend of Zelda Mario Kart 8, and it includes a Link without personality, with a track in the Zelda universe, a track in the F-Zero universe, a third remaster of the Rainbow Road from Super Mario Kart with no additions, no anti-gravity, no gliding, nothing, which seems insufficient, especially for a track that has already appeared in 3 previous games. And it's the same story with the second DLC called Mario Kart 8 Animal Crossing, featuring Animal Crossing characters, Dry Bowser, yet another recycling of another character who was already there on Wii. A new remaster of the Baby Park, which once again lacks interest without the crazy and item-packed vibe of Double Dash, and another track in the F-Zero universe. It's not a bad idea to add content, but unfortunately it turned into a showcase of Nintendo licenses being waved around in all directions to encourage fans to buy, which is sad because it disrupts the Mario universe that has always been emphasized in Mario Kart games. Animal Crossing and Zelda have nothing to do with Mario and distort its universe. If there had been a Super Mario Galaxy DLC with tracks retracing the iconic locations from the games, for example, that would have been great, but this seems very forced and a bit inappropriate. However, I have to admit that Nintendo's work on the tracks is great and largely on par with the original tracks, or even better for some, like Big Blue or The Wild Woods, which are really well done. Despite all of this, and despite the few flaws raised, Mario Kart 8 is a resounding success thanks to 4 elements. The tracks are exceptional at every level and among the best in the entire series. The visual and sound work is incredible and once again surpasses the entire series. The anti-gravity, underwater driving, and aerial sections provide a blistering pace to most races and bring very original tracks. And the 200cc mode brings a huge breath of fresh air to the series that helps address some of the base game's shortcomings. It's very difficult to follow up after Mario Kart Wii, and yet Mario Kart 8 does fairly well while being more polished on Nintendo's part. And the game's sales are exceptional, with almost 1 Mario Kart 8 per Wii U sold, and it will also boost console sales, albeit only in a spontaneous manner, unfortunately. But Nintendo isn't done with Mario Kart 8, and decides not to settle for just 9 million copies sold. After the lukewarm reception of this Mario Kart, many were expecting a new Mario Kart for Nintendo's new home console, the famous NX, which would become the Switch. And Nintendo didn't keep players waiting long, as towards the end of 2016, in the console's presentation video, Mario Kart 8 appeared as playable. Then in early 2017, it was confirmed with a release date set for mid-2017. Following this, a few trailers were released, and the game arrived in April 2017, just a few weeks after the console's launch, becoming the most criticized Mario Kart game in the series. Firstly, the concept of releasing a remaster of Mario Kart 8 for a new console several years after its original release is highly questionable. Nintendo had never really done something like this before. With each new console, there was always a new Mario Kart game, each with a different vision. What's even more surprising is that even though the Wii U sold poorly, Mario Kart 8 itself sold very well, reaching almost 9 million units sold, which is huge. It outsold Super Mario Kart, Super Circuit, and even Double Dash. Mario Kart 8 was far from a commercial failure, which could have justified a port to the Switch to capitalize on its success. However, this was not the case. It seems to be a purely commercial decision that surprises, as it wasn't Nintendo's usual practice to release remasters, even though it has become a specialty of the Switch since then. Making a remaster also presents another significant issue. The 9 million players who already bought the game on Wii U find themselves with the same game on the Switch, giving them a sense of weariness at revisiting a game they've already played for dozens of hours without any real changes. What's even harsher is that even players who purchased the game on Wii U must buy it again on Switch at the initial price of $60 to play with their friends, as there is no crossplay or anything similar. This is especially cruel, considering they've already paid for the game on Wii U and the season pass afterward. But what's even more cruel is that it's not even possible to import their save data, meaning they have to replay hundreds of races to unlock everything again, as it's once again done with coins that unlock customization items. To use the same combo as on Wii U, one must arm themselves with patience and play repeatedly. The same goes for online points. Players who have already played the game on Wii U start back at 0 points like everyone else. But since they've been playing the game for years, they are much stronger than others. For a long time, they completely disrupted the online game by being much stronger than their opponents, leading to them getting bored with much weaker plays. Moreover, for a long time, online races were almost always in 100cc, which is really slow, especially for Mario Kart 8, which has already been heavily criticized for its lack of speed. On top of all that, online play has now become paid, whereas on Wii U it was entirely free and of very good quality. Now, one must subscribe to Nintendo Switch Online, and for a while, the Switch's online service was of very poor quality before they decided to improve it partially during the COVID-19 pandemic. But before the game's release, Nintendo had promised a 200cc mode online, which could have pleased those who had already played the game on Wii U, and ultimately, this mode never materialized. There are a few 200cc races online at random, but unfortunately, there's no dedicated 200cc mode. But beyond all that, Nintendo made some changes to the gameplay that completely disrupt the smart balance created by Mario Kart 8. Firstly, Nintendo removed fire hopping, that challenging technique that allowed players to maintain their mini turbos for longer, adding significant depth to the game's gameplay, which seems to be sorely lacking in complex mechanics for experienced players. There's no snaking, no abuse of the bikes like in Mario Kart Wii, no crazy circuits with super difficult shortcuts that left more room for creativity like in Super Circuit. Without fire hopping, the gameplay could be described as flat, even though there are still some more advanced mechanics like soft drifting, which takes advantage of the fact that the courses have very simple turns to optimize the way they are taken. But Nintendo still made some notable additions to this version of Mario Kart 8. Firstly, what has been heavily emphasized is the introduction of a proper battle mode, and this battle mode is excellent. It consists of many different modes. The classic balloon battle mode where you try to pop the balloons of other players while keeping yours intact. The coin battle mode where you collect coins. The shine thief mode where you must grab the shine and hold on to it for as long as possible. The bomb-on blast mode where you can hurl bombs at each other and explosions go off everywhere. And even a piranha plant mode, which corresponds to cops and robbers. And all of this comes with plenty of different maps. The battle mode is excellent, very generous and well designed, although there's still that annoying time limit and the maps are still a bit too large. But what's really cruel is that the battle mode now makes much less sense due to a major change. Nintendo decided to add the ability to carry 2 items at once, and even double items to pick up. Unfortunately, this completely throws off the balance of the game. While Mario Kart 8 had succeeded in highlighting racing mechanics and forced players to manage their items well, now we have items all the time. It's chaotic, and it feels like the races have become the battle mode of the game. It's excessive in the wrong sense of the term. Items have too much power over the course of the race because, since players' items are assigned based on distance from the leader, it contributes to giving similar items to close players and thus creates a pack of players. It feels like everything is always decided in the last half of the third lap because the game artificially forces players to stay close, and driving has very little importance in these races, especially when coupled with the lack of complex mechanics. Additionally, almost all the races in the game have shortcuts at the end, giving it a very random aspect that wasn't present in previous Mario Kart games. While they could be unfair at times, it wasn't as consistent. And as a result, it overwhelms the action with these double items scattered all over the tracks and all 12 players racing simultaneously. There's so much happening all the time that it becomes more annoying than anything else. We don't have time to emotionally engage in the races because anything goes all the time. The Mario Kart formula is to have a deep racing game on completely crazy tracks with items that occasionally disrupt the flow. But here, it's the opposite. The races have become a situation where the skill gap between players is so small due to the game's shallow mechanics coupled with these omnipresent items that they constantly disrupt the flow of the race, making it uninteresting at times. Fortunately, there's still a small gameplay addition introduced by Nintendo, and that's the third level of drifting. In previous Mario Kart games, we had 2 levels of drifting, the blue drift, which comes out quickly, and the orange drift, which takes a bit longer to initiate. Well, Nintendo has added a purple drift that takes even longer to initiate, adding a bit of complexity to the gameplay while still being natural and easy to grasp. It also helps to make other types of vehicles stronger, an intelligent change that will transform some races, although it doesn't significantly alter the gameplay of the game overall. And that's not the only addition, because what's surprising is that Mario Kart 8 Deluxe includes driving aids. These aids are so strong that they practically drive for the players. They prevent falling off the track. They steer for the player. It's ridiculous and lacks any sense. In what world is it a good idea to have the gameplay for the players? Especially since it's activated by default for new players in multiplayer. What doesn't make sense is that Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is the easiest game to pick up in the entire series, and where items are most important. There really wasn't a need for these aids to help players get the hang of the game, let alone activated by default. Of course, the first few races might be tough, but that's normal, and players will quickly get better. Giving these aids to players will make them rely on them all the time and never improve. With these additions, Nintendo also brought the time trial in 200cc, which was sorely missing in Mario Kart 8. There are new characters, not necessarily very interesting, like Gold Mario, who is just a retexturing of Metal Mario, himself a variant of Mario, but with some welcome returns like King Boo, for example. But once again, the game lacks solo content since it's a game on a hybrid console with a portable part. Despite this, there's still no mission mode, whether solo or online, or anything else really convincing for solo play, especially considering the weak AI, which isn't very interesting to compete against. In September 2019, after announcing it a few months earlier, Nintendo surprised everyone by releasing a Mario Kart game on smartphones, Mario Kart Tour. However, it received a very cold reception from both the press and players alike. Despite successful visual and sound atmospheres, the press noted that the game's business model was too aggressive, featuring loot boxes and a pass required to access the 200cc mode. The controls were criticized for being too chaotic compared to previous handheld console versions. Additionally, a mandatory online connection to play, the lack of nearly any original circuits at launch, and those that were included were described as disappointing. The circuits were greatly simplified to fit the smartphone's simplistic gameplay, and the multiplayer mode took a long time to arrive. Overall, the game faced numerous criticisms that persisted for years. And yet, in early 2022, Nintendo announced a season pass for Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, 5 years after its release and 8 years after its initial release on Wii U. A season pass for a deluxe version is very surprising, and the circuits were released in waves very quickly. However, they were hugely disappointing because they were merely ports of circuits from Mario Kart Tour. These circuits were overly simplistic and lacked interest for the most part, not even offering original designs. Some of them appeared for the third or fourth time in Mario Kart games, adding to the monotony of replaying the same tracks, sometimes even worse than in previous versions, such as Coconut Mall. Though some circuits like Yoshi's Island were excellent, a significant problem arose. Many of these circuits were not even inspired by the Mario or Nintendo universe, completely contrasting with the rest of the game's tracks and making their inclusion in the game even more questionable. It's been about a decade since Mario Kart 8 was released, and the game holds a peculiar position today. On one hand, fans of the series are completely tired of a game that arrived back in 2014 and has seen only minor evolution since. In contrast, Nintendo used to release Mario Kart titles much more frequently, with 4 installments in just 7 years during the early 2000s, each introducing captivating innovations and revolutions. Now it's been 10 years with essentially the same game, and this doesn't align with the new direction of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, where gameplay lacks depth and items dominate the experience. However, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe continues to sell remarkably well. In 2023, it was still among the top-selling games of the year, putting Nintendo in an uncomfortable position. While they recognize that fans are growing impatient and clamoring for something new, the ongoing success of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe makes them hesitant to release a new title. This dilemma led them to create a Season Pass in an attempt to strike a balance, but unfortunately the Season Pass disappointed many players. And if Mario Kart 8 is doing so well, it's mainly because the Mario Kart series is a legendary franchise, an incredible journey that began with a prototype of a 2-player racing game using the Super Nintendo's Mode 7 graphics. From there, it evolved to incorporate the Mario universe, introducing game-changing items that refresh the gameplay and spark the birth of a wildly popular series. Mario Kart is a special and original series, with each installment having its own direction, identity, and charm. It has united millions of players worldwide, fostering friendships and creating countless memorable moments with its chaotic races and lighthearted fun. The Mario Kart series is remarkable because it offers players extraordinary and unique sensations, and that's why it has skyrocketed in popularity over the years. And it's unlikely to stop anytime soon. Whether it's Mario Kart 9 or 10, it will likely arrive on a different console. Thank you so much for watching this video until the end. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please consider liking and subscribing. It's crucial for the growth of the channel. See you soon for the next video. Take care.